Far away inside a castle, they performed a summoning from another world. A hiss of steam filled the large room. A crowd gathered in the center of the room and had no idea what the place was or how they had gotten there, while a girl in a school uniform, clearly frightened, said she had been on her way to school a minute earlier and now found herself somewhere unfamiliar. For the past few years, the kingdom has fought demons, suffered heavy losses, and is now on the brink of a national disaster. They decided to summon powerful people from another world to help fight their enemies, and the 18th generation of summoned ones answered the king's call and did an excellent job, becoming known as the Great Heroes. A crowd of strangers doesn't understand what is happening, and all they care about right now is why they're called heroes. The kingdom's people want to test their skills, and among the crowd, a schoolgirl shows a rare ability called Divine Scythe, surprising everyone who sees it and leading them to call it a real success. The magician pointed at her. The girl was surprised and the others turned to look, and as they examined the group they found another rare ability that they call the power granted by the gods when they crossed into another world. The king shouts that skills cannot be given to the representatives of their world. They are only blessings from the gods. These people were summoned from another world and given gifts by the gods to serve them. They are called heroes. The crowd is confused, but joyful as heroes with certain powers are called to a completely different world. Lady Momoko tried to deny it, but a resident of the kingdom interrupted and said she has the divine scythe skill, able to erase high-level demons with a single swing. The king is pleased that many others in the group have good skills. This time, the summoned ones truly impress him. One subordinate called out to his excellency. Calling him my lord, the robed man introduces the summoned Norio Itanami and says the hero has no abilities, which the character window confirms. Noticing Itanami, the king falls silent, and the young man in an awkward position waits for his lord's reaction. The city buzzes with activity as crowds move about and descend into the underground passage to the metro, while multi-story office buildings stand in rows like giant walls. Itanami Norio sighs heavily, dreading another day as a corporate slave and feeling the weight of a packed subway as he steps on, certain this is not where he wants to be. The carriage is packed, so he angrily squeezes in to avoid waiting for the next train, and then his nose hits something soft that turns out to be a plump man. He looks around to figure out where he is, and a man introduces himself as God. All autonomy could think of was his own death. According to God, the boy was called to another world. His father Zeus chose him, and Zeus was king of the gods. Athena is their administrator, but the other gods complained that she discriminated against men, so this plump man takes care of the clueless items. Norio asks again about the summoning administrator. The boy is unaware of what is happening. The god introduces himself as Festus and says he is skilled in such matters. Festus grants the boy an unusual skill. Hephaestus had never given someone a skill before, so he prepared as thoroughly as he could. Autonomy, nervous about receiving the skill, said that if it was something great, he wasn't sure he could accept it. Hephaestus offers the skill he created, Master of Excellence. He extends his hand, holding a glittering sphere. Norio is clearly not thrilled with the divine gift. The man says the skill is very hard to use, but assures the boy he will definitely cope with it. Those words sent Itans into even greater panic. Hephaestus presses the sphere to the young man's chest and says he poured his heart into creating the skill Master of Excellence. The young man asks to use it to the fullest in his new world. The boy recalled his conversation with God the night before he arrived in another world. People panicked because the summoned person had no skills, and it was the first time this had happened. Itanami turns to the king, thinking that humans' lack of skill is a problem and that he will not be able to fight demons. Norio wanted to ask the king something, but the king shouted for everyone to be quiet, and Mellard answered in advance, saying no one could return. Reluctant, the boy doesn't ask, but a panicked Momoko repeats that he can't send them back, and Mellard says they can summon heroes to their world but don't know how to return them. Only the Demon King knows the way back, so the heroes have to go to the front and defeat his army. Utanami says he can't join the war without his powers. That makes him useless. Then Enwari suggested the following and asked for a piece of land, explaining he wanted to change his life because he felt useless in the kingdom, and his request stunned the king. Distance from the kingdom does not matter to him. Once he has the land, he can live alone, away from them. Unable to return, the boy decides to leave the life of a corporate slave behind. Confident, he wants to begin a second life in this world. The king's officials are stunned by the summoned hero's audacity, since he has no abilities. Itanami stands with the guide before the empty expanse, the desert stretching in every direction, and from now on the boy is in control. The man says His Highness bought this for Nauri and paid his salary. The young man can live here as he likes. Being knighted and given uncharted land meant it wasn't part of the kingdom. Itami doesn't quite understand that it's normal for a king to buy land for a hero. The guide says this is wonderful, since anything outside the kingdom is not its territory, and because the area is unexplored by the kingdom, the boy will not have to pay anything to the king. Itanami is clearly pleased because he can farm freely. After that, the man holds out his hand in a begging gesture and demands payment for the trip he gave the young man. After the guide receives the payment, he leaves, saying the kingdom will no longer ask anything of him and telling him to go do whatever he wants, whether the boy lives or dies. As Nari says goodbye to the man, she feels bad that they are paying for him because he lacks the skills they desperately need in the war against the demons. Standing before a valley of empty fields, I feel a new life beginning here and now. Most stories have a hero who goes on a big adventure, teams up to overcome hardship, defeats the greatest enemy, and becomes famous, but the boy doesn't need that. As he sets out on his journey, Yutani sees the king and his subjects as desperate people. Walking along the empty boulders, he imagines he could live peacefully like this. He tells himself to enjoy a calm life in this new world. To avoid them, the boy wants to go as far from the kingdom as he can. Standing at the shore, he enjoys the sea breeze and believes there is nowhere better to be. Joyfully waving his hands, he felt a sense of freedom and declared he would stay and make this place his personal kingdom. First, Nori wants to make sure he has water so it will not be a problem later. He sat on the rocks by the water and tasted it because he thinks it is seawater. The young man scooped a little water into his palm and tasted it right away. It was fresh lake water and safe to drink. Delight filled him when he saw a sea creature's tentacles poking out from under the stones in the water. Then he remembered that octopuses do not live in shallow water or in fresh water. Finding the octopus in the supposed lake is no longer his priority because securing food for the near future is urgent. Grabbing the tentacles to pull the creature out, he slipped on the slick surface and began sliding toward the water. After falling into the water, Itunami surfaces with his eyes wide open and the same octopus on his head. Standing up straight, he was surprised the water felt so salty, since when he tasted it earlier it had been ordinary and fresh. Itunami, wanting to confirm his suspicions, cupped water in his palms again. A man with an octopus on his head drank some water and realized once again that it was still drinkable. Joy lights his face as he calls the new world amazing. Climbing out of the water, he realized this would cause no problems. After taking the octopus off his head, he now thinks only about food. After tossing the sea creature into the container, Itanami realizes he has no seasonings and decides to cook the octopus in salt water. Nori wants to start his first fire. Using a hunting knife, he cuts a hole in a dry stick and carves a notch. He will insert the stick into the depression and rub it to form coals from friction, then move those coals to the brushwood prepared earlier. Itanami exhaled, gathering all his strength to pour his soul into the first fire he had ever made. Getting down to business, the boy twirled the stick between his palms at furious speed and worked hard, and the flame flared on his first try, which greatly frightened the autonomy, an outcome he had not expected. A sea creature is boiling in a pot over an open flame. Nori set out a plate and chopsticks. As Itanami ate an octopus tentacle, she only thought about how quickly the fire had started. Grinning, the boy felt proud of his survival skills and then remembered Hephaestus, the god of the hearth, saying the young man's ability is a superior skill. Thinking over the man's words, Enwari stood before a field thick with plants to confirm something. Swinging his sickle arm, he shouts to activate his Master of Supremacy ability. A huge strip traced the swing of his hand and destroyed everything in its path. Autonomy could not find words for it. He felt he could not do that. The Hephaestus did not fully describe the ability he granted. After that, he seemed to understand what a good life was. He picked up a hoe and tried the same thing he had done with the sickle. When he stuck the tool into the ground, the same thing happened. Noir was both shocked and pleased by what he could do. Bending down, he checked the land after using the skill. It had been plowed so thoroughly that he didn't need to do anything else. The bed ended up so large because he had pictured how it should be. Itanami concludes that the mastery of excellence he received from Hephaestus multiplies the effectiveness of everything the boy holds. Realizing this ability would make his farming prosper since it came easily to him, the young man kept working and planted strange seeds he had taken from the city in his garden. Nari stands by his garden beds, breathing a sigh of relief. Proud of his work, he does not know exactly what he planted. If those plants grow and he can harvest them, he will not have to worry about food. There are even worms in the soil. The plants took time to grow, so the young man went fishing to have something for dinner. Sitting on the shore, Itanami enjoys fishing. He believes his life would last longer if he worked for the company, but thanks to her Hephaestus, the boy can control the waves. The boy thanks Hephaestus for the wonderful skill. Someday Noir will have seaweed and rice. In that dream moment, his fishing rod got a bite, and he pulled the line toward him with all his strength. The man could tell by the tension that something huge was on the hook. A long-haired girl rose from the water and took the bait. Itanami clearly had not expected that. Stunned by what is happening, he pulls the fishing rod harder and loses control because he caught a girl instead of the fish he wanted for dinner. Wrapped in fishing line, she caught his eye, and when he saw her tail he realized she was a real mermaid. He snapped back to reality, distracted by the mermaid who called him a peasant in a hypocritical tone and was outraged that he had dared to pull her out like that, so the young man did not dare argue, thinking she was hostile. Shouting, the girl insists that because he caught her he must marry her, and those are the rules of the new world. Itans had enough of that statement when the distance between them suddenly dropped to 0. He has just gained a wife in another world. The mermaid is upset about being taken by a hillbilly. For a merfolk like her, nothing is more humiliating. Now she lives as an exiled mermaid. The loser gives his body and heart to the winner. Motionless with the hook in her mouth, she cries because autonomy caught her. This is very different from what the boy imagined. After removing the problem from her mouth, the mermaid began to cry, humiliated and unable to return to the way things were. Noiri wanted to object that the girl had been caught on a fishing hook, but she won't even listen. Mermaids are proud and really hate living beings and people. The man has no choice but to do something about it. She screams at him, unable to accept that a mermaid, like a fish, could be dragged ashore by someone like him. It hurt her pride, and now she cannot return to the sea. The mermaid keeps screaming that it's karma and she has no choice but to be his wife. From now on, someone must be responsible for her autonomy. The young man is not used to this. He has heard that in his world, marriages between different species are more difficult. From the girl's tale, it seemed unlikely he would get married. He believed her thoughts would not come true. She pulled out a bottle of strange liquid and drank it sip after sip. After the girl drank the elixir, a sudden bright light burst from her side and blinded the boy. The mermaid's tail slowly becomes human legs. The man stares at the girl in shock and then turns away, embarrassed because she now has legs and is naked from the waist down. Proudly, the mermaid says she will not be happy living on land, but now there is a chance to have a child. After that, the boy will stop complaining about her. Tsunami calls out that he understood and asks to be covered. The young man realizes he panicked and accepted everything too quickly. Now all he has is an empty field. The girl dislikes the clothes Enwari gave her. She was outraged when he shouted he would not marry her if she refused to wear pants. Standing by the flower beds, Hitanami tells her he can only make clothes the girl likes, but he has no home right now. A young man came to plow the field, and they soon noticed the new sprouts. Sprouts appeared in every bed, surprising the boy and his future wife standing nearby. This might be one of the abilities Fastest gave him back then. If the boy remembered correctly, Fastest had said he gave him supreme power with various tools. The new bride grew curious about what her husband was growing. He did not know whether he had planted fruits or vegetables, so he came here to check. The young man says he wants a simple life. The girl calls the landowner very troublesome. Itanami says he knows nothing about fish life. She adds that she understands her husband only wants to live in peace. Noir mockingly reaffirms her confidence and says proudly and solemnly to rely on her. Healing is the mermaid's innate power, and the girl is skilled in healing magic, but the young man did not fully follow the discussion, which irritated her. Proud and enthusiastic, she tells him not to be shy about asking if he doesn't understand, then begins to take off her pants, which leaves Utanami deeply embarrassed. Running to the water, she said she would grab some things from the house, then jumped in and became a mermaid again. I had no choice but to watch and wondered what had happened. Entering the forest, he believed the mermaid truly wanted to be his wife. All he wanted was to escape the hustle and bustle of life. With a small hatchet, Itanami realized she might not come back and immediately began chopping down a tree to build a simple house. After a while, the boy looks at his creation with pride and enjoys its simplicity while sitting in pleasant solitude. Delighted, he never imagined he could build a house in an hour. Enwari calls himself a real man. Sprawled on the bed, he rests. Even with Hephaestus's gifts, the work still tires him. Resting after a hard day, Itani thought his weakness came from the mermaid joining him, and remembering her, decided she would not return. Nori was sleeping soundly on his new bed when the girl returned, her arrival waking him, and the mermaid ran into his arms, joyful and once again bare below the waist after drinking the same elixir. Confused, Autonomy ordered her to put her trousers back on, which the girl disliked because she doesn't like them. Worried, he asked where she'd been all day. She looked at him and turned away without speaking. Crossing her arms over her chest, the mermaid says this is not a human matter and thinks commoners do not care about anything. Leaving the house, she told him she had trouble cooking. The word cooking caught the Eaton's attention. They stood before a large shaitan. A machine called an aggregate was used to create a magical medicine. Beaming, the girl explains that by mixing a little magic with different potions, she can make a magical medicine with different effects and demonstrates it for those without magic. Itanami asked about the cold medicine, and the girl said proudly she would take care of it later, once all the preparations were finished. The mermaid ran off to fetch something she needed, and the young man told her to be careful. He planned to threaten her for lying, but she returned before he could, holding a huge fish. The tuna's name is baoenji. Its meat contains a lot of mana. Nori doesn't understand any of it. He is surprised not by its magical power, but by how big the fish is. Using one hand, the girl cuts the fish into pieces. Itanami imagines her hands are swords. The mermaid began to cook. She brought the water to a boil, adjusted the pressure, and kept it steady. Grind an ingredient into powder. Moments later, the girl shows off fertilizer made from the baoenji fish. Wary is wary of it being fish fertilizer. If the boy spread this fertilizer on his farm, they could harvest faster, and the mermaid happily got down to work, while Itonami wondered about the mermaid's intentions because she really wanted to help him cultivate the fields. The next day, every plant bears fruit. Both of them are shocked by the fish fertilizer's effect. The young man had already put wooden pegs by the plants. He picked a tomato from the bush and decided to try it. Itans really enjoy the taste of vegetables. He describes the girl as a very unusual mermaid. Sand still watches the young man's behavior wearily. The girl decided to try the tomato and picked it from the bush. After one bite, she fell quiet and drooped. Nori began to soothe her, aware this food might not suit mermaids. That was wrong because his future wife enjoyed it very much. She was surprised that people on Earth eat those foods every day. The mermaid pulled the carrot from the ground to taste it too and enjoy a different flavor. Itanami stopped her and said some vegetables must be cooked before they can be eaten. The girl complains it is all too much trouble and is being capricious because she wants to eat more vegetables. Nwari then began cooking the food in seawater. The mermaid sat on a rock near the soup vat. He handed her the plate so she could try how the same vegetables tasted together. Itanami worried the mermaid might not like the food he cooked. After tasting the soup, the mermaid looked pleased because it was very tasty. Serving himself some soup, the young man is clearly pleased. He wishes it could be this way every day. Still enjoying the meal, she asks her future husband whether people always eat food this delicious. Itanami says it's not quite like that and suggests adding meat to the soup, and if possible, creating a signature spice to make the dish more delicious. The mermaid is surprised to learn that food already delicious can taste even better. Nori says this is possible when you add seasonings. First, prepare the spices. He wants miso and soy sauce for cooking because he already has the meat. Smiling, the boy says he also needs equipment. Itanami enjoys the taste of these vegetables so much he loses himself in his mysterious world of pleasures. At that moment he realized he still didn't know the girl's name. The mermaid who became human was named Platy. Ito wanted to say his name, but since he was in another world, he thought he might have to change it. Smiling, Itanami introduced himself as Kedin and said he was glad to meet her. Platy slurps her chopped food aggressively and stares at her husband. This is how everyday life with a mermaid begins. Itanami Nori, now called Kidden, came from another world and has started a new life with a mermaid wife. Sitting on the floor, he rubs his back from the pain after sleeping there. Seeing the Platy missing from the bed, he assumed she had woken before him. She looks human but remains a mermaid, and the man wondered whether a girl could sleep on a board, feeling puzzled because it looked like a fish sleeping on a cutting board. Kidden hopes the mermaid is not angry with him for catching her on the hook. To put the thought aside, he decided to ask her about it. As the boy tried to leave the house, he heard Platy's shrill scream that sent all the nearby birds flying. Kidden asks her what happened. She shouts that someone is in the fields and points to a straw scarecrow crow wearing a hat with wooden hands. He breathed, felt relief, and said it was just a scarecrow. It was the first scarecrow he had ever made. Kidden explains it is artificial, with movable upper limbs and wooden swords at its fingertips. Continuing the story, the man said this is used to scare away birds that spoil the crops. She believes the scarecrow can move to scare the birds, but the man laughs and says it doesn't work that way and the scarecrow can't move. Standing before the girl, he tells her that putting the scarecrow in the middle of the field will make the birds think it is a man and leave the crops alone. The young man did not see that behind his back, the same scarecrow was waving its wooden swords. The girl told him about it. He turned and stared in disbelief as his creation danced, since he had only made it as a simple scarecrow to scare birds. Kitten stood with his mouth open, stunned to see them actually moving. The girl was surprised because she had thought the scarecrow should move. It should not be happening, and as he looked at his hand, he wondered if his strength could be causing it. Platy wondered why he was staring at his palm. Her new husband then admitted that a god from another world had summoned him and that he was a stranger here. Kidding thought about the scarecrow's behavior and became certain the cause was a power from God. The girl realized this and said he was a summoned hero. The boy was surprised she knew. Platy crosses her arms proudly and says she knew, explaining that every era used summoning magic to bring a hero from another world. She wondered about the boy, since heroes must fight demons to protect humanity. Blushing, he agrees with her. She rolls her eyes and asks what a hero is doing in a place like this, where they are now. A happy cat sits by the crops and explains he doesn't want to be a hero and is hiding here. The mermaid finds this strange too. The boy seems unconcerned. He holds a ripe vegetable in his hand and looks happy. He listens as the girl speaks. Platyfish said he seemed to belong to a tribe used to living together. People from another world are generally weak, so if someone is alone, they will be killed immediately by a monster. The boy does not deny his wife's words. She considered him special, but he refuted this as he sat beside the tall bushes. Smiling and holding a tomato, he reminded the mermaid that he does not live alone but lives with her. Platy wondered whether he was strong or weak and couldn't make sense of it, while behind her the man was eating a fresh, ripe tomato for breakfast. Still squatting, he said he'd seen her leave that morning and feared something had happened to her, which stunned Platyfish and left her a little embarrassed to answer. She shouts that she's going to the toilet, of course, and is surprised that earthly people are so curious, while Keaton only shrugs in embarrassment. Then he decided to ask where she goes when she needs the toilet, but he did not need an answer because he already knew it was the sea. After a brief pause to take in the situation, he sat on the ground knowing he needed to dig a hole for a makeshift toilet, but had forgotten one important thing while trying to survive. Alone, people are vulnerable. Even a simple insect can threaten them, let alone wild animals. Now living with Platy, he breathes a sigh of relief. Deep down, the boy feels incredible relief. Suddenly, the boy wondered what the girl thought about the situation and the time they spent together. Platy, who had been leaving earlier, held out a plate to show the starfish. Kitten asked what was on the plate, and the girl said they are a type of sea monster that absorbs all organic matter floating in the sea, also called a sea cleaner. Platyfish adds that these creatures can purify water. The boy still does not fully understand the nature of these sea monsters. To show how the sea cleaners work, she took out her penknife, held the blade to her forearm, cut herself, and let her blood drip into a container of starfish, which shocked Keaton. Platy, proud, tells him to watch the sea cleaner, the sea monster, at work. The cadet grabbed the girl's forearm, squeezing the arteries in it. He yells at her for what he did. Platia stares at him with an innocent face and says nothing. The man tries to stop the bleeding. The boy looks upset and tells her she must stop, and he is very worried about her. And after he calms down, he admits he is shy and insensitive and apologizes for his behavior. Kitten is nervous because of the power God gave him, so he's always anxious, and when Platy faces him, she says she likes him a lot and denies what he said. Now his wife, she vows to always support him. Kitten is taken aback and embarrassed by her words. The mermaid thought he opposed it, but she was wrong. Proudly crossing her arms again, she said a wife's role is to support her husband. Smiling, he turned to her and thanked her. She said nothing, turned away with her nose up, embarrassed. The toilet was built and another problem was solved. Platyfish reminded her it was time for breakfast. Far beyond the world's seas, terrible sounds come from a rocky cave, and the demon in the cave's darkness senses an ominous presence as something approaches. Platy called Gideon over to show her new outfit. Instead of trousers, she had turned a piece of fabric into a skirt. Yesterday she wore trousers, and today she had a new outfit. Spinning in front of him, she said she had tried to remake the furoshiki that was in her luggage. He hesitated and stammered, wanting to say it wasn't worth it, but the girl told him not to worry about it. The mermaid said plainly that a wife's duty is to be beautiful for her husband. There is nothing strange about this. With a work briefcase in hand, the girl said it had been a long time since she left. The man did not understand what she meant or where she had gone. Her ears pricked up, and she smiled as she told Kitten she had found a dungeon. The boy pictured a dungeon as a place to find treasure, an underground shop, or a site to fight a terrible evil, with the top floor as the boss's resting place. He asked Platyfish what the dungeon was like. She said it was better to see than explain, and urged him to hurry. They reached that very rocky cave, which was in a completely different direction from where they lived. Kedon felt exhausted after walking 2 hours to the cave. Platy found the dungeon while working in the fields. This is a cave-type dungeon. Cave-type dungeons form where mana flows, though this one looks like an ordinary cave. An unsuspecting young man was caught in a gust of wind that seemed to pull him into the dungeon. Kitten felt like an unseen giant beast was licking his whole face, and Plate was puzzled by his expression, which was strange and surprising. Energy circulates around the world, but in some places the flow stops and builds up. This place turns into a dungeon. Highly concentrated mana becomes a monster born here. It shimmers and moves on the ground and under the water. Hidana shivered with fear and felt a flush of heat. Going into a dungeon like that could lead to trouble. Nothing could stop Platy because they were already there. Wiping a bead of sweat away, he was relieved his wife could handle it. Clearing the dungeon is a complex skill. She only needs to defeat them. Because of that, the young man often steps in again. Weighed down by the incident, he didn't feel he had to protect her. After all, they were now husband and wife. He asked her to wait. She turned in surprise because a minute earlier he had given no hint that he would go with her. Kitten rushed over, proud and selfless, and said this work was for her husband and they would go together. When they entered the dungeon, they were surrounded by brick walls instead of the usual stones outside, and torches burned everywhere, lighting their way, and the boy noticed it looked like a castle inside while the girl was equally puzzled. A suspicious puff of black smoke appeared ahead, so she stopped. The mermaid stayed on guard and shouted at Keaton to leave immediately. The smoke turned into magical beasts and insects charging toward them. They appear to have broken loose. The stunned man stands behind his wife, who is ready for the coming battle with demons. The boy, numb from the horror he has seen, watches as Pletty, searching her bag, shouts at her husband to leave. 3 test tubes held unknown liquids. She ran up and threw them at the beast. Like a whirlwind, the creatures dissolved into tiny particles in the air, leaving only a shadow. Kitten stares in amazement at the scene. The monster charging toward them has turned to dust, and Platy says that is not all. Only 3 test tubes remained. One froze their bodies, another electrocuted one of the demonic beasts, and the last held acid that dissolved the body's cells down to the skeleton. Platy crosses her arms and says proudly that mermaids can make combat magic potions just as well. Her husband appears to have post-traumatic stress disorder from what he saw. Moving forward, the girl kills the remaining monsters, and Keaton calls her the most dangerous creature, even though she just saved him. The boy thought of his wife's bravery because he could not leave the task to her. With no tools at hand, he was useless in battle. In the corner by the wall, he spotted a glinting object. It was a battle sword. Holding the 2-handed sword, Kedon was pleased because his highly skilled master would boost its damage. While the girl cheerfully tossed his potions around, he doubted he would ever use the weapon. Calling to his wife, he asked her to stop for a moment, saying he was at his limit. He said he'd already won and would soon go home. Many agreed, and he turned to move on. Then he asked her how many monsters they had destroyed. Anxious, the girl scans the dungeon as everything there feels wrong, and the young man listens. The girl says the dungeon is fine, but the commander-in-chief monster is somewhere ahead, possibly deep in the dungeon. She turned to face Gidon and changed commander-in-chief monster to boss so she could explain it to her husband, who understood nothing. A boss is in the dungeon. Caves like that are very rare, and the dungeon is extremely dangerous. Step by step, the girl tells Keaton there are only 2 types of bosses that can be main dungeon bosses. One type is a dragon. Once again at the cave entrance, a fierce blizzard of magical energy engulfed them, blowing the man back a little, while Platy stood firm and did not step back, knowing who was sending the enormous surge of energy. He's in the dungeon and something sinister is closing in on them. The young people stand and wait for that boss to appear. Kidding thinks it's a dragon and asks Platy about it. Platy's wife, pricking up her ears, says it's much worse than a dragon. Before them stands the boss, the king of the undead, a ruler without life. The undead hangs over them like the moon in the sky. His eyes offer no hint that anyone will leave here unharmed. Frightened and sweating, Cadhin asks the girl about the creature that appeared before them, and she, bracing for battle, says it is a powerful magician or high priest. The immortal king rules at the pinnacle of the undead and has powerful magic and keen intelligence from birth. Facing a powerful undead king in a dungeon means one thing, an inevitable painful death. The young man doesn't want his life, which has only just begun, to end so soon. Kitten has no intention of retreating. The king of the undead breathes in and releases a stream of energy, saying he senses a strange flow and will turn the boy into a living corpse who will become his friend. She threw her potion test tubes at the demon, expecting some effect. When they hit the king's skull, the bone melted and then reformed with the crown, showing he was not vulnerable to her potions. Kitten saw the monster heal itself. She was not surprised because she had expected it. The demon was immortal. Facing a dangerous enemy, Pletty shouts that she has plenty of potions in stock and urges him to run away quickly from here. When the words were spoken, the young man thought about his chance to survive if he ran away and whether he could live on as planned, while the boy screamed that he could not do it, yet he had something he had picked up on the way to the boss. Realizing potions couldn't hurt the undead king, he charged forward with his sword drawn. Kaiden shouted he was her husband and would save the girl. Desperately, Kaiden jumped toward the magical entity that could kill him instantly. The young man's words touched the girl. As if he touched her proud heart with gentle hands, he flies at him like a hawk to its prey. The man is ready to deliver a critical blow, but the king asks him to stop. Lying on the floor, he said he was giving up. Both Kitten and Platy stood there, completely bewildered. The king does not want to feel pain. He did not expect the young man to open the holy sword, which contains enormous power. Stunned, the boy held his holy sword up in front of his face. Platy stayed silent and did not interrupt. The monster asked the boy where he had gotten the sword. The monster, looking like death, remembered the holy sword from his dungeon. Kitten apologized and reached to return it. The undead king claimed the sword now belonged to him, but the holy sword has a will and chooses its bearer, and it has chosen the young man as its new owner. The undead king has lost his treasure, and with relief in his soul, he says his duty in this world is finally over. He asks to be killed with the sword because his body is cursed with immortality. The sword could cleanse the king, but the boy does not want to and says he is not the right person to wield it. He claimed to be from another world. At that time, God granted him the power to fully master all kinds of tools. That may explain why Kedun can wield the holy sword. The monster knelt and cried out loudly, declaring it a gift from the gods told of in legends, and that an exceptional ability cannot be confined to ordinary skills. Anyone blessed by God deserves to be called a hero. They are holy people. The undead king bowed to the puzzled kitten. The creature turns to the people who bring blessings from the gods and asks them to give him some of their immunity. Stunned by what is happening, the man asks not to be given a higher rank, and Plato expected her husband to be so composed. The undead king looked puzzled and asked why the young man had come here. Keaton said he had recently moved in nearby. The girl stepped in and said destroying monsters is the resident's main duty. Monster fur and bones are baked into the materials of magical tools, and some even taste good, the girl said with bliss on her face. Her husband grew tired of her words being politely received, and she thought a nearby dungeon would be convenient. Overjoyed, he asked permission to enter the dungeon and go berserk. The king agreed because he had originally wanted to destroy the monsters in the dungeon himself. As a result, the young people helped him a lot. Platy is very happy and thanks the undead king for granting permission. Finding nothing wrong with it, he smiles with the king. Behind them stands a stunned boy. Seeing a friendship form between the king and them, the girl introduced herself in Kitten and said she wanted to meet the evil spirits, and the king paused, realizing he had forgotten his name, which left Platy puzzled because she had not expected him to forget it. If he's not mistaken, he was an archbishop in the church in a past life. The mermaid listens closely to her new friend. For unknown reasons, church members abandoned him and chased him here. In the dungeon, an entity absorbed the gathered mana and cast a powerful spell that eventually killed him. He spent hundreds of years in this place. No longer possessed, he has forgotten his own name. The king is so upset by this that he sheds a tear. The husband and wife feel sorry for the lifeless king and regret that this happened to him. The entity admitted he was just an old man who had lost even the simplest desire to live and felt life had no meaning. From that moment on, after the children arrived, his boredom eased a little, and the king was undoubtedly glad. When Kitten smiled, Platyfish noticed. He invited Kitten to visit sometimes and said they would be happy to greet him with the vegetables he had made. The boy called the king sensei. She pricked up her ears and asked why her husband had chosen that name, and because he had been a great clergyman when alive, the boy decided to use it. The spoken word reached the lifeless king, who had spent hundreds of years in the dungeon after the spell killed him. Still kneeling, he thanked them for their kindness. Now they had a good neighbor. Heading towards the exit, Kidon shouted to the sensei in panic that the sword would not leave him. The king laughed, and the girl felt burdened as she realized the sword truly loved him, so the man received the holy sword. Keaton cried out with joy that it was finished, deeply pleased with what he had made. When Platy asked about her husband's new building, he showed her the structure and said it was a forge furnace. He draws his holy sword and admires its incredible power as the blade slices through a boulder like soft butter. The girl hinted at the sword's true purpose. The mermaid grew curious about why someone would build a forge furnace, and he reminded her that he had received a gift from the lifeless king, Sensei. Platyfish realized the man was referring to the manner metal the sensei had given the boy in gratitude. She admires him deeply, calling him a magnanimous sensei. The dungeon's magic is so dense it can turn into mana metal and simply give them that rare resource. Platyfish wonders what the boy will do next. With the valuable metal in hand, he can finally use it to make what he has wanted for so long. The boy looks forward to it. Keaton forges while the girl watches in admiration because the metal is pure mana and could become a fine magic sword. Reliable magic weapons cost at least 10 gold. A man displays what he created. They were a frying pan and a knife with the sharpest possible blade. Keaton bought kitchen utensils and is as happy as a child. The girl is in a daze, thinking about a magic sword. Her curiosity about what it is grew. The boy began to describe, showing each item and naming it because showing was easier than explaining, and then he started to cook. Kaidian cuts vegetables with this kitchen knife and then fries them in a newly forged magical frying pan. Like a Michelin star chef, he theatrically seasons the plated dish, and the girl waits eagerly to taste it. The boy prepared fried vegetables, a new dish for his menu, and many people lit up and reacted with joy at the sweet taste. While eating the delicacies, she noticed their dishes had changed, and Cadden had made not only a frying pan and a knife but also ordinary dishes. Sober now, the mermaid can't understand why he is wasting this mana metal right now. The boy admires the mana metal, which heats quickly, does not burn, and is easy to clean. This is not a dream but a real fairy tale. This will slightly expand the boy's cooking skills, and he seems happier than he was before moving to the other world. Platyfish, feeling like she'd been shocked, asked about the recipes he wanted to add. Enjoying his new cooking tool, the man said there were some, but they'd need a few more ingredients. Angry, the girl demands to know what else he needs for this. Hearing her, the young man thinks he really wants meat. Anticipating the dish's taste, he says adding meat will make it taste completely different. The girl can't wait to try it and invited him somewhere. They move through the forest. As a mermaid, Platy has never seen the mountain monsters she always wanted to eat. Twisting his sword in his hands, the young man thought they'd hunt the usual human way. The girl agrees there are monster birds, boar or deer, but she's not interested. Mountain monsters are best for cooking. Platy cheerfully says people claim mountain monsters are very tasty. Kedun concluded those creatures are used as bargaining chips in this world. She then asks her husband for his opinion on caves, for example, how he thinks monsters are born there. This cave dungeon is controlled by Sensei, the lifeless king, who uses his powers to command the monsters and keep them from coming out. If mountain monsters were here, the whole mountain would be a dungeon. She wants to reach a logical conclusion, so the young man understands everything and asks no questions. They stopped. The boy can't believe a dungeon like this is so close and feels upset that there are no normal animals here for them to eat. Entering the forest thicket, they spot darkness ahead where light glints off a cluster of eyes, probably animals, and find a whole pack of monstrous boars that are clearly not in the mood for peace or friendship. Platy was thrilled by the discovery, while Kedon began to sweat with fear, and it seemed the young man would never get used to the new world. He's terrified because the boars clearly look ready to attack them. She even knows they're kind, square boars. Bloody jumps for joy, saying this place is incredible. There are 2 dungeons nearby. Keaton is stunned and scared and does not understand why they would be happy about this. When the grill starts to fight and pulls out her potions, she asks her frightened husband to hold them back as long as possible and promises to put them down quickly. Boars attacked the young man one by one as he held the holy sword, and though he wasn't ready to fight, he had no choice and had to do what was necessary. With such a powerful sword, he put the boar down one by one without letting any of them touch him. A pile of bodies lies behind him. Kitten holds his weapon in front of him and pants from exhaustion. Platy celebrates, saying he did everything magnificently. She didn't even have to use any potions. Not in the mood for a fight, the boy said he won because they attacked one after another, and he caught them off guard. At least they will be able to eat something other than vegetables. The mermaid is impatient to start cooking. Because they had so much meat, she suggested cutting it into cooking-sized pieces. To freeze them with a potion, Kedon considered building a wheelbarrow and a refrigerator to store the food. After a short time, the boy built what he had planned, a refrigerator and a wheelbarrow full of provisions. When the young man asked his wife about the freezing potions, she crossed her arms over her chest, proud and doubtful that he trusted her, and the girl had a whole supply. Keaton, sincere and with tears in his eyes, thinks it's enough. Their daily life is getting better, and for the girl nothing matters more. Perking up, she says this will help the boy make better dishes and asks him to cook faster. The boy just laughs at his wife's reaction. Wild boar is still pork. A young man who wants to make the most delicious dish from that meat will make tonkatsu. Brushing the drool from his daydream, he thinks only about the crispy crust of tonkatsu. The girl is outraged that her husband is imagining it and enjoying the thought. His dreams were replaced by thoughts because ingredients would be scarce again. A problem will arise when making bread. The obstacle lies in the eggs. Plenty is angry about this. He then asked the girl if there were eggs in this world like eggs from another world. She replied, upset, that she'd heard landlubbers here do something similar, but in the mermaid's land you will not see anything like that. Pletty points to a crow that has landed in their field. Kitten says this one won't be good for cooking. The girl offers a bold plan to return to the mountains to search for the monster bird, but the young man refuses. While he thinks about having to kill the monsters he has found, a huge creature flies in the sky behind him, coming closer every second. The boy felt pressure from behind and was confused. He turned to see what caused it. The girl stared at the creature and opened her mouth in surprise. Platyfish thought it was a bird or a plane, but Kittim said it was a meteor racing toward them at breakneck speed. When the creature came close and whipped up a swirl of wind around itself, they realized who it was. The girl was less afraid than Kid N, and the winged creature was a real dragon. He demands their souls for invading his dungeon. She points to the mountain they were on, and Plotty recognizes it as the dragon's dungeon. Cadence stands silent and frightened with his mouth open. As the dragon's powerful wings whipped up a whirlwind around her, the girl realized the dragon ruled that dungeon. Nearly sobbing with fear, the boy calls to the mermaid, remembering her words that the dungeon has no ruler, and she realizes he is drawn to the young man's strength. The dragon is named Grinsel Dragon Shroud, repeating her demand to know who invaded the Royal Mountain dungeon without permission and who killed her minions. She already knows the young man did it. Covering his face with his hands, he tries to wriggle out of it, saying they didn't know the mountain had an owner. The powerful winged creature still towers over them. Keaton asks forgiveness and vows never to return. The dragon does not even listen. Grinsel Dragon Trout deems the act unforgivable. These lowly creatures invaded her home and acted as they pleased. The humans tarnished her honor. That is why she will wipe them from existence. Grinsel sets out to purge the consequences of their sins, and in a burst of real anger, breathes fire to turn them to ash. Her fire sweeps across the whole land like a blast wave. Platyfish and Kiden do not know what to do. Panicked, the girl thinks they are doomed, but the boy clears his head and remembers his holy sword. Acting like a true hero, he swung his weapon, shielded Plotty from the dragon's fire with his body, and tried to block the dragon's blow. He cut through the flames closing in on them. If he had slowed for another second, it would have been over. Grinsel Dragon Shroud is stunned by this turn of events. To her, humans are lower life forms, but they manage to protect themselves. Exhausted and gasping, the boy acted and saved them both from certain death. The girl managed to accept it and then began to panic about what was happening. While in the air, Dragon Shroud finds it impossible that a mere human could repel her death breath. Kedon was worried not for himself but for his wife, who was happy that her beloved had succeeded as expected. He didn't just reflect the breath of death. None of its fire remained. The boy thanked the gods that all the seedlings survived and turned to the dragon with a serious look that made Grinsel's Dragon Shroud shudder. Like a polite citizen from another world, he bowed and apologized for entering the dungeon without permission, but added a small condition. With his sword held out and the blade tip aimed at the dragon, he says if the other truly has a claim, here he will fight the ruler to protect what he holds dear. Standing with his holy sword held out toward the dragon, he offers the dungeon monster to fight the boy in a mortal battle, though he hopes the creature will simply leave. Grinsel Dragon Shroud saw the sword in the selfless youth's hand and turned toward him. The dragon wanted to say something about the sword he held. The man had nothing better to say, so he spoke up. Keaton held his sword forward and said it was the very holy sword Grinsel Dragon Shroud had been thinking of, the sword the immortal king had given him, implying he was extremely powerful. The dragon landed and said the answer was wrong. The act made the young man tense and left him in a stupor. That holy sword belongs to Grinsel Dragon Veil. The monster reached for its treasure. The youth froze in fear. Then the lifeless king spoke to Grinsel Dragon Veil. His words were true. Like the dragon Grinsel, the young man did not expect the master to appear suddenly, shielding Kitten with his back. Unleashing a powerful attack, he sent everyone back like the wind, and Sensei knocked the other lord aside. The winged creature lay lifeless on the ground. The master turned and said it had all happened because of him and apologized profusely. The young man did not quite understand what he meant. Then Play T stepped in to clarify the situation. The immortal king said he had come to him first because he was tracking those who had infiltrated his mountain. The dragon called him a worthless corpse for daring to invade his territory, and after that the sensei mentioned Kidden's new neighbor. Cursing his neighbor, the dragon flew off to find the brazen creature invading his territory. The lifeless king realized his mistake and, laughing awkwardly, finished the story of the misunderstanding. After that, the young man still did not feel any better. He hinted that he felt guilty, since they had indeed broken into the Dragon Mountain without permission. The young man thinks that if anyone is to blame, it is them. Sensei does not object because he is human too and understands his friend. To most people, dungeons are not a good source of raw materials, ingredients, or building supplies, and not a reliable place for steady income or essential items. The lifeless king explains this is also why people team up to conquer dungeons. The immortal king tells Grinzel Vale that invaders are common for the dungeon master. The dragon only gulped. Pointing at his powerful winged neighbor, he says getting angry over a small part of the dungeon being captured and leaving his territory to punish the invaders is completely shameless. Scolded Grinzel Vale was covered in sweat, and for supposed powerful being his actions were narrow-minded and childish, yet he still thinks he is worthy of being called the heir of the geyser dragon. The sensei meets the dragon's gaze, says Kaiden is not his equal, and orders him back to his mountain at once, while the boy peeking from behind the master's back hesitates on hearing it. Grinzel Veiled refuses the immortal king's demands. He cannot understand why a worthless man would possess the sword. His father told him to take the sword from a dead man. The creature cannot understand why a corpse would give the sword to another mortal. The lifeless king points out that the sword has a will of its own and chose this man, and Kitten is flattered by the sensei's words. While the dragon's father lived, he began to understand the immortal's power. He feared her, unlike Grinzel Vale, who only knew how to burn everything mindlessly. Paying with that sword was natural. Furious, the dragon refuses to accept that excuse and is ready to fight the mortal to the death to claim the geyser dragon's treasure. The lifeless king of evil spirits then challenged the creature to fight him, and the mighty beast hissed in response. He turned and began to fly away, refusing to join the fight this time, then shouted to the young man Kitten to remember this day, and Kitten, with no better idea, asked the astonished Grinzel Vale to wait a moment. In desperation, the boy grabbed the powerful creature by the tail and knocked it flat on the ground. The young man did not expect that. Grinzel shouted at the boy, calling him worthless for daring to touch him. The frightened boy jumped aside and apologized. Sensei reminds them that the dragon cannot defeat them. Kitten turned to the dragon, and because he did not seem in a hurry, the boy asked him to join them for dinner, though Grinzel Dragon Shroud did not quite understand the boy. A man displays a prepared dish made from a dungeon dragon boar. Kitten doubts the powerful creature will like the steak, but still offers to try it. After a moment's thought, Grinzel looked at the small piece of meat and threw it into her large mouth. With all his taste buds excited, the dragon rose to his full height and said it was very tasty, and an explosion from the powerful beast shot into the sky, sending a blast wave across the area. The dragon blew a strong gust that scattered the youth, leaned over, and said it was really delicious. Kitten was clearly pleased the dungeon lord liked the steak so much. Jealous Grinzel, Platyfish, asks for more meat and begs for a piece of steak. The boy is excited because he doesn't know how much more needs to be cooked for everyone. A blinding light flared behind the children, and when they turned, Grinzel glowed like a light bulb, leaving Kedon and Platy stunned. They watch the dragon glow as it slowly shrinks. The young people stare at the astonishing sight. The silhouette of the huge powerful creature grows smaller with each passing second. Grinzel Dragon Shroud is a small girl wearing a dress with a fluffy skirt. 2 tails on her head are tied with bows. She appeared in all her grace. The stunned newlyweds realized the dragon had become a little girl. Kitten did not expect the creature to be female. Sensei explains to them that dragons have a unique power that lets them take human form. Grinzel, drooling at the thought of the food, shouts to the boy that she loved the steak he made and admits she will always love him. The girl stood up at the table and demanded they bring her meat quickly. Platy is outraged by the dragon's behavior because she is next in line and should be standing and waiting. Kitten decided to fry more meat so there would be enough. The lifeless king decided to try the cooked dishes and it proved worthwhile. The king enjoyed the steak. The boy is pleased. The sensei says the meat was fried perfectly. What impressed him most was the seasoning. Keaton said he used garlic for flavor and added salt and pepper. To him, it's the simplest dish. The immortal king refuses to believe it and says that even in the royal palace they cannot make a dish this delicious. Grynessel, the dragon shroud, lies helpless on the ground after eating too many steaks. She tells Keaton not to think too highly of himself. Nearby, a mermaid with an equally huge belly is relaxing. The girl warns him firmly not to get carried away. She still holds out hope for the holy sword, but he points out she's inexperienced and it can't happen yet. The boy apologizes, saying the weapon itself won't let him go. She steeled herself and vowed to silently burn the man to ashes with her death breath, then take the sword for herself. Plotty sits beside her and reminds her that if she does this, she will no longer be able to eat the best steaks of her life. Greensel saw the obstacle to carrying out her plan. A fierce whirlwind wrapped her body, and as she turned into a dragon, she told Kitten to remember that one day she would take this sword from his hands, and until that moment, she would come to taste his food. The boy agreed and said goodbye, saying he would be glad anytime. Grinzel Dragon. Shroud began to fly away. Plotty asked her to wait a few seconds, wanting to ask something. Likely out of concern for her husband, Grinsel asks if there are any monster birds in her dungeon, and after a moment she says she does not know how many, but the birds are bony and not good to eat. The mermaid doesn't want their meat, she only wants their eggs. Dragon, Shroud still doesn't understand why they need the birds' eggs. Plotty says excitedly that if they have eggs, Keaton can make the meat even tastier than it is today. Lightning strikes Grinsel. She turned at once and flew straight home. The mermaid asks the powerful beast who makes wind with his wings to stop once more. Plady, ears perked, proudly says she knows monster ecology and asks to go with him. Kitten hadn't expected his wife to want to fly with the ruler. Grinzel Dragon, Shroud agreed without hesitation. A moment later she flew off with Plady on her back, slowly leaving the land where the boy and the lifeless king remained. Kid Anne froze, watching the girls fly away in silence, while Plady screamed that she did not intend to return home empty-handed. The lifeless king called what had happened a rather nice picture. The boy agreed without hesitation. Smiling at the endless sky, he says it's better to be like this than to sit around bored. Kedon shows his creation to his wife, who stammers in disbelief, and the boy confirms her thought, saying he turned a man into a sword. Eyes glowing, Plotty stares at the weapon and says this monometal sword will be the strongest in the world, aside from the holy sword. Hoping for wealth, she thought the man would sell it for a high price, but her dream of riches was destroyed when Gideon refused to sell. He upgraded Kakashi into a scarecrow that stands in their field and can move, and the boy is extremely happy with what he did. She couldn't quite understand why it was meant specifically for Kakashi. The mermaid frowned, bewilderment clouding her face. Kitten reassured her that they still had mana metal left. Her frown turned to joy knowing the scarecrow's swords would cut up the annoying birds attacking their fields, and he didn't understand what she meant. The boy watched what their living dummy had done, and Kakashi delivered a sword-like slash that easily cut the bird into pieces. Keaton shouts at the scarecrow that killing is not allowed on his territory. The mermaid, seeing this is impossible, feels slightly upset. Kakashi cannot even reach the birds flying and screaming above him that seemed to taunt him. The boy seemed relieved and happy. Platyfish didn't quite understand why her husband gave swords to the scarecrow. Instantly darkening and delighted, the boy shouts that this is cool, his eyes shining with happiness. Kitten is deciding what equipment to give Kakashi-kun, and the girl says she really doesn't understand male romance. Before the wide sea, Kitten sits with a fishing rod in hand and a sword on his back, enjoying the moment because it has been a long time since he went fishing. He remembered that on his last fishing trip he thought he had caught something big, but it was a mermaid and he married her on the spot, and then he instantly decided to live with Platyfish. A hired hand like him was called to another world. He thought he could enjoy a leisurely life here, but he could not. Life grew colorful when the mermaid became his wife. There was an immortal king and a dragon. His days are always busy. The boy went fishing to get a moment of peace away from all the hustle and bustle, and that quiet moment was good for him. Keaton heard a sudden splash, and a boy with fish fins on his head surfaced from beneath the sea horizon, the sudden silhouette frightening him. He looked at the boy and asked if he might be Platyfish's friend. The boy was very friendly with the mermaid man. The creature still distrusted the stranger. The stranger rose from waist-deep water, and his only real threat was death. Kitten fell silent and tensed. Raising his hand, Platy's possible friend called for everyone to get ready. Warriors and mermaids in uniforms emerge from the water, and their commander orders them at once to kill the man on shore and anyone who resists. At their command, the mermaid warriors formed a wave and rushed toward the stunned Kidon. They moved in slowly and pointed their tritons at the boy, who stood in shock with his mouth open. Back in reality, Kedon grabbed his holy sword by the hilt in time and swung it. A single wave of his hand created a tornado that spun the warriors as they tried to attack him. Keaton realized what he'd done and froze, unsure what to do next. The exhausted warriors' bodies gurgled in the sea. An agitated Plady ran toward the noise. The loud commotion alarmed her since she was far from her husband. The boy tried to explain what was happening, but was interrupted. Someone who might be a friend of Plate's rose from the water and called her name. He had also been caught in the Holy Sword's tornado. The girl was surprised to see a familiar face. The young mermaid was not a friend at all, but the brother of the mermaid's wife. A deathly silence hangs between them just a few meters apart, and Kitten alone doesn't understand what's happening because Platy never said she had a brother. The mermaid warriors rushed to the girl, calling her their princess, and Kitten grew even more stunned by his situation. Upset, the girl stared toward the sea where mermaids splashed and called to Princess Highness to ask if she was safe, and Platy decided to introduce herself properly. The man who tried to kill her husband is her older brother. Prince Arwana is the next heir to the throne. The boy did not expect to see not just a princess, but the prince himself standing before him, and he gaped. Platy crosses her arms over her chest and proudly reminds him she said she was a princess. Turning to her older brother, the girl decides to introduce the boy to him. The prince does not quite understand what is happening. The princess proclaims the boy is her husband and calls him Kitten. The girl shows no fear of the consequences, but the boy is terrified and tries to stop his wife from speaking. The whole mermaid army, including the prince, heard the words and froze, their mouths open in shock. Platy stands firm and says she understands her older brother came to bring her back, but she refuses to return to the mermaid kingdom and asks that her parents be told. Enraged, the prince says this is unforgivable because the landruler defiled his sister by kidnapping her, and he tells his army the battle will resume. Platy's older brother calls her husband a scoundrel and plans to get rid of him and get his little sister back. The princess tells her beloved not to worry and not to be embarrassed to counterattack, while the boy who holds the holy sword is afraid to do so because they are not strangers to her. A strong gust from behind Platy and Keden blows the fish into the sea. Their second attempt fails. A fierce wind blew from Dragon Vale as the dragon flew into the sea's roar, and the prince was shocked that the dungeon master himself had arrived. An entire army of warrior mermaids fears this powerful dragon, convinced it could devour them with a single breath. Grinzel Dragon, Shroud, landed beside the humans and asked if they were okay. Kitten thanked him for his help. The prince was stunned that earthly creatures had befriended a dragon. The beast laughed and said he could not eat the tasty meat if the boy disappeared. Plenty told him not to be proud just because he was thanked. The girl's older brother wanted to speak to the three creatures, but the dragon noticed he had been left alone. The prince turned and saw the sea empty behind him. Grinzel, the geyser dragon's daughter, promised to turn him into coal immediately as a reward for not running away. Kaiden struck the mighty beast on the knee so he would not dare do that. They howled from the blow. The boy says the man in the sea is Pletty's brother, which surprises Fail. Keaton invites the prince to dinner with him. The girl's older brother does not understand the boy's behavior. The boy offers his hand, inviting a calm talk to explain the situation and get to know each other. Unimpressed by his generosity and convinced he was plotting, the prince refused to listen. Platy cut in and told her brother to hurry back to his kingdom at once. The husband shouts at his wife, saying it's wrong. Her brother came all the way here because he is worried about her. He thinks he should hear everything the prince wants to say. The girl did not expect such a reaction from the young man. Hearing this, the elder brother said he had changed his mind. A bright light from the prince blinded Kedon. As a prince, he could not run from the fight because his honor was at stake, so he accepted the challenge. The boy is stunned that his brother came out of the sea naked and without any embarrassment. Kitten tells him to cover himself. The brother finds that rude, but the girl anticipated it and prepared some clothes for him. She hands him some underwear. The boy realized his wife had already faced a similar situation. He invited his brother to join them. Worried, Vale tells Platyfish that Kitten will feed him and that it's a chance to try a new dish, while the girl stays silent, unsure of what is happening. The older brother saw the newlyweds' house and called it pathetic. Their sister is from the mermaid's ruling family, but Caden lets her live in a rundown dwelling. Platyfish is angry, and the boy is embarrassed. In his underwear, the prince shouts at the boy, accusing him of enslaving and using his sister. Platy then pointed to another building. This is the barn where they keep the meat from the mountains and the vegetables from the fields. The older brother is stunned not just by its size and shape, but by the strange walls. Kidnon said the walls are plaster he found in the mountains. The sister called to her brother. She points at another building. It's the brewery where they ferment. Kitten says dreamily they're waiting for the miso and soy sauce to be ready. The older brother doesn't understand the foreign words the boy is saying. Platyfish says her husband knows things the others do not, is a skilled cook and a strong fighter. Kitten can do anything. The warehouse the girl showed earlier is her magic room. Kedon, her husband, always takes good care of her. While Platy brags about him, the boy invites the prince to sit on a chair. Having cooked a new dish and recently made a garden table, the young man invites people to the table to drink tea and talk, but there was already a girl at the table. The older brother didn't know where the child came from, but Kitten said it was Grinzel Vale in her human form. The girl hurried him to fetch a new dish. A dragon sits in front of the prince, leaving him stunned. Platyfish, offended, says she is always like this when she asks for food. Kitten introduces a new dish called zenzai. While he grew soybeans to use as an ingredient, adzuki beans grew as well. They all picked up their utensils and began tasting the dish. Their brother was cautious because the food was unfamiliar to him. They all tried the traditional dessert soup at once and agreed it was delicious. The brother and sister savored it, but when Vale asked for more, there was none left. The beans sprouted by accident, only a few grew. Everyone is angry that there are no tasty beans left. The girls turned to the prince and blamed him for arriving at the wrong time and for the lack of soup. The older brother dropped to his knees and apologized to the boy. Kitten's skill is unmatched, as if he were a saint or a sage. The young man asks him to stop, but the prince truly believes his sister is in love with him. He said he was leaving his sister in her care. Platy was pleased, but Kitten wasn't sure it was right. It puzzled him why he was against it. When the young man first heard the mermaid was a princess of the Mermaid Kingdom, he realized her high status meant he could not choose a husband for himself so easily. He realized many people had placed expectations on her, but she shouted that it was not true, saying she was married only to him, did not care about other people's expectations, decided to live her own life and called him a fool. The brother tries to calm his sister, saying Mr. Cent is unaware of his wife's situation. The prince wanted to tell the truth, but Vale said there was a conflict over who controlled the surface between humans and demonic creatures. The neutral mermaids learned of it. A political marriage was imposed. The brother is shocked that the girl knows she has reminded him of who she is for several hundred years. It reaches her ears whether she wants it or not. A war rages between humans and magical creatures, and Kitten is summoned to this world as a hero to fight them. My brother says interference from both sides will now increase and rulers will be forced to choose. If the mermaids do not pick a side, they will become enemies of both sides and targets of their attacks. Rumor says the kingdom's leaders are deciding which race Platyfish must marry into. This matters to Kedon. Convinced that Platy can save the kingdom only by fleeing, the brother who met her here in peace wants to honor her wish as her older brother. The prince tells her he is glad she has found a good man, and she is clearly pleased by his words. On his knees, the brother asks to protect his sister and to marry her officially. Keaton tells him to stop but agrees to make the marriage official. Vale interrupted the young men's conversation to ask about marriage, and the embarrassed young man answered yes. Shroud will also marry Grinsel Dragon. Kedon is stunned by this, and Platy looks at her rival with jealousy. Vale thought about how to get the Holy Sword and discovered that if they are married, the property is divided. To a dragon, a human life is just a blink, and as his wife, she would enjoy exquisite meals every day. She asked him to marry her. Kedian refused. The girl was shocked, even though the man already had plenty. As for the Vale, it knows nothing. If the male is strong, having several females is normal. She called the guy the master. Kitten said he was not her master, and that, even if he was strong, he opposed polygamy. Dragon, Shroud burst into tears at his answer. She doesn't understand why this is so. Her guess is that she isn't as strong as the immortal king or that the man hates her. Still sobbing, she demanded that the boy marry her, and Keaton agreed if she would stop crying. Vale screamed with joy, Platyfish was stunned, and the young man apologized to his brother. The prince said fathers of daughters everywhere share a common bond. On the surface, the women are very annoying, and Platy is upset with her brother and the newcomer because of their behavior. The newlyweds are walking along the shore, while the brother has gone home to tell his parents, and the couple is waiting for their parents' approval to marry officially. Worried about Keaton, she senses something is wrong. Running away from home when royal life became unbearable, she met him. When caught, she was forced to become his bride. Life here is fun. Her beloved's cooking is delicious. She wants to stay with him forever, but she only annoys him, and she cannot return to the Mermaid Kingdom. Keaton simply smiled, and knowing her situation, he has no intention of changing how they live now. God gave the boy strength. People saw him as useless in battle, so he came here. He does not call himself a strong man. He believes they can work toward a happy life. From that day on, embarrassed, he asks the girl to stay with him. Platyfish stares at him with burning eyes. Overjoyed, she jumped into the arms of her soon-to-be husband. They are happy together. Vale called out the hugging boys, saying he had made her wait. The girl kept calling him master. At their feet, she rages on the ground, saying she is hungry. Kitten and Platy exchanged a look. The boy decided to act. He will give her a treat as a wedding present. The mermaid is pleased too, and the girl says anything will do as long as he does it quickly. Kitten decided to build a house and thought they needed more help. Platy held out a starfish, thinking that was what the boy wanted. The boy said that was not what he meant and explained he was thinking about the workers. Platy asked again. Keaton replied that they needed to work the field now because he wanted to sort the harvest and gather what was already ready, and that he was already busy because he had started making miso and soy sauce and had a wife. Keaton said he wanted to build a house. Plato was delighted, and the undead king called it exciting. The undead king's words frightened the heroes. They had not expected his presence and said he had appeared without warning. The boy asked if something bad had happened, and the king reassured him that he was simply free, had come to visit them, and was fine. Relieved, Kitten nodded as the guest said he had another gift of mana metal and handed him a piece. Amazed by its size, the boy said it would be a great help. The undead asked whether he really needed the stone, and he nodded that he could make many household items from it. He added that it was just in time because he was short of workers, and the king asked what he meant by hands. Kitten explained that Platy's brother had noticed they were living in a terrible house, and the young man said he would build something completely different now, putting all his strength into the house. Taken aback, Plenty suggested asking the undead king for help, and Kidda pictured the king making miso to speed things up, but dismissed the idea as stupid. The undead king asked how many workers were needed and whether he could bring them here. Kedem was taken aback and, thinking he had misheard, asked again, but the king of the undead replied by asking whether 10 would be enough for him. Confused, the young man said he would be grateful, but did not see where he could get so much. The undead king vanished, asking him to wait a moment. After a while, Kedun and Platy could hardly believe their eyes when the king of the undead stood before them, accompanied by 5 orcs and 5 goblins from his dungeon. He explained the monsters were born in his dungeon and obeyed his orders, then ordered them to obey the saint so the young man could use them as needed. Keaton was very surprised. After that, he greeted the monsters and introduced himself as Shyly, but the monsters remained silent and motionless. Keaton couldn't understand why they didn't react, and the undead king explained that they could not speak. He said they had just enough intelligence to follow orders, but lacked self-awareness and any instinct for self-preservation. Keaton understood. The king said he did not have to give them a reward, and they live off mana in the air, so he did not have to feed them, and Platy was very happy with the news. She shouted excitedly that Kitten would solve all his problems with them, and when the man stayed silent, Platyfish asked if that was true. Agreeing that she was right, the young man bowed gratefully to the king and thanked him sincerely. The undead said there was nothing wrong with it, wished him luck building the house, and then disappeared. He clenched his fist. Filled with joy, he called out about the plan to join forces and build a great house, but the monsters stood motionless, so he felt like he was speaking into a void. Kitten began giving orders, sending orcs to carry logs and goblin to saw boards while he taught them to use the machines. After a while, the foundation was finished. Plutty said the monsters were amazing, and Kedon admitted he wasn't sure at first, but the house was turning out much bigger. He added that orcs are physically strong and suited to hard work, while goblins are skilled with their hands. The young man said goblins often make mistakes with hard tasks, but with patient teaching, they learn little by little and get better. They even learn to cut grass and weave it. He smiled and said that even with monsters watching them work, he still wanted to be kinder to them. Plenty smiled at her beloved husband's words. She explained there was no need to feel too much sympathy for them, since they were created from mana and could not be called living beings. Kitten put his hand behind his head and said this was true, but everyone should be given the opportunity to live well. Platyfish explained that magical creatures often use these to fight humans, sending large armies because they expect the monsters to die and can then be replaced by a dungeon. Surprised, Kenan still believed that everything from food to waste processing was handled by monsters. Sighing, he accepted that this was the world and nothing else. The goblin stumbled and dropped the things it was carrying. Keaton turned around. The young man ran over, asked if the goblin was all right, helped him up and kept checking for injuries. The goblin stayed silent. Ketan noticed they weren't responding and wondered if he really wanted to speak to them. The goblin answered, snapping the boy out of his thoughts, then said he was fine and turned to Cadden to repeat it, leaving the boy and Platy stunned. Then the man dropped to one knee and asked again if the goblin was okay. The goblin said yes. Addressing Kitten as his lord, he said he wanted to work more, and the goblin beside him agreed. Keaton was shocked to see the other one speaking too, and then goblins and orcs came from all sides saying they wanted to work for them. Allard. Plotty refused to believe it, but admitted the monsters now seemed self-aware. The boy insisted self-awareness couldn't just appear that easily. Looking at his hands, he realized it was likely the power he wielded, and his skill and sense of superiority felt so incredible he resolved to use it with caution. Clenching his fist, the young man decided that if he used all his strength he could talk to them and ran up to the goblins, hugged them, and thanked them sincerely. Many believed they could not use them now and would refuse them later. Goblins rejoiced and tossed the hero into the air. Eventually the large house was finished. Everyone was pleased, but Grinzel was astonished. She asked everyone what had happened while she was gone. Platy called her a stupid dragon and told them to listen and laugh. Smiling triumphantly, Platy said this was her and her husband's love nest. Grinzel rushed inside, saying she needed to look around. Platy tried to stop her, but the dragon in human form stood amazed, saying she had never seen a building like that. Keaton looked at her and asked her to take off her shoes and leave them in a special place. Vale did not understand, so Keaton explained that this would prevent damage to the tatami. After a moment she took off her shoes, rolled on the tatami and asked what kind of bed it was and why it felt so nice. Platy asked if she was going to stay. The young man said it was fine, since he had built such a large house for that reason. Platy grew wary and asked whether humanoid monsters would live there too. Kedon said that was the plan. When he told them, they dismissed it as ridiculous, saying they could not possibly have anything so incredible. They said their home had originally been a dungeon. Keaton thought this would cause trouble for the undead king. He then said they needed to build a house for them, with many rooms called an apartment building, and when the goblins tried to object, he added that he would also include a bathroom and a kitchen, and that help would be welcome. He turned to the monsters and asked if they could help him with this. The goblins were flattered and all answered yes. Platyfish couldn't understand what kind of intrusion this was, since she had thought only she and Kitten would live in their love nest. One goblin ran up and Kitten called him Gabukichi. Platy asked about the name, and the boy said Gabukichi was the goblin's best sewer. Gabukichi said the boy's order was ready. Delighted, Kitten went into a room and called out that it was a futon. When Platy asked what a futon was, Kedon said it was a gift he had given his wife. He said he grew cotton next to the grass to make tatami because he wanted a futon in their new home. Then he suggested that the Platy lie there. She didn't understand but decided to try and lay down on him, asking if it was right. After lying there for a moment, she shouted that it was so comfortable she had no words, and the man was glad she liked it. Sitting down beside her, Keaton apologized that she still had to sleep on the bare floor. Platyfish thanked him sincerely for that. She then turned to Gabukichi and thanked him as well, which caught the goblin off guard and left him embarrassed. Then the heroes vowed to work even harder, so their farming life would be wonderful from that day on. At that time, a large sailing ship neared the shore as the wind whistled across the waves. A goblin on the shore filled a bucket and sighed. Then he saw a sailing ship on the horizon, looked closely, and wondered what it was since he'd never seen anything like it before. Later in the house, Cadden handed a glass of water to Platy's brother and asked if something had happened. Looking around in amazement, the man said the house was incredible and that God must have blessed the young man with special powers. Kidner agreed and laughed sheepishly. Facing each other, Keaton explained what today meant, and Arwana agreed, saying it was about the wedding between the young man and Platy, and that the news would spread soon because he had already told his father. The boy asked what they had told him. Arawana said the father had been confused at first. The man told him about the boy's strength, and the father agreed. Arawana explained that the boy did not belong to any race. Kidon nodded and said he was glad, but added that Platy was tense over the political marriage. He then asked about the people and magical creatures. Arawana said they were furious. Kidon expected that. Brother Platy said their father had declared his daughter would marry a great saint. He was astonished by those words and asked if they had resigned themselves. The man replied they were angry about losing the chance to marry Platy, but since the enemies were also after her, it was better to leave things as they were. Kidon said he understood and was glad things were settled for the time being, but at that moment, Arawana pressed his forehead to the floor and fell to his knees. Caden looked surprised and asked what had happened. Arawana said they would do everything to keep the boy out of trouble, and in return asked them to look after Platyfish. Kaiden calmly asked Arwana to stop and get up, adding that he was glad to be with Platy and grateful for it. He told me he had come here alone, saying that without Platy he would probably still be living by himself, and like the king of the undead, might have even forgot his own name without realizing it. Arwana was taken aback when the undead king was named, and Kaiden explained he meant their neighbor, an immortal king also called the undead king. Arwana was completely shocked, and at that moment a goblin rushed up to them, frightened. He brought bad news. The enemy was attacking from the coast. Many magical monsters had landed. A goblin said orcs and other goblins were now fighting them. Kidane and Arwana were shocked by the news. Keaton asked if any magical creatures had come here. Arwana said it was impossible because this place was a top-level secret. He was shocked by the news. They spotted a ship in the distance. Brother Plotty said it was definitely a ship of magical creatures. Kidding asked the orc in front of him if Orcubo, who was at the scene, was okay. The orc stepped aside and Kenan saw a kneeling demonic woman. Orcabo said this person was Asterisk the Milky, though he wasn't sure. When Kidden looked at her, she snapped at him to stop staring and mind his own business, then introduced herself as Astras the Heartless, a demon lord and one of the 4 heavenly kings. Orcs told the boy she had come to kill their lord, so they captured her. Keaton was surprised, looked at the nearby pile of bones, and asked what they were. The goblin said they were skeleton warriors led by magical creatures. He said there were about 100 of them, but they were all defeated, and Kidden was shocked that 100 lost to 10. The young man walked up to the monsters and said he knew how strong they were, but asked them to stop taking risks because he would be sad if they died. The monsters replied they would die for him, and Kidden was angry because he had just said that was impossible. Asteris was furious at being ignored. Erwana stepped forward and asked how she had learned about this place. The demon lord was stunned to see the prince of the Mermaid Kingdom. She told him they'd grown stupid from their easy life and shouldn't underestimate the demon's intelligence, then cut the rope with her nails and said that even if an eternity passed they'd still not understand, so she could free herself. Astri stood to her full height and drew her sword, declaring she would take Princess Platy and kill the great saint who stole her, then pointed the blade at Kedon and said she meant him as everyone around grew wary. Erwana described it as a bloodthirsty demon lord who rules the high ranks of demons and whose presence on the battlefield makes even its allies tremble. A man rushed forward saying he'd try to figure it out, but Keaton and the undead king both told him to stop. Keaton turned and smiled while Erwana tensed, and the undead wanted to know why it was so noisy. Then the man also turned and shouted when he saw the king. Keaton smiled and introduced them to each other. Astras and Erwana screamed in fear, calling him the scourge of the world, and were shocked the boy knew him. The lifeless king said he had heard the demon plan to kill Kedon. The boy confirmed it. Estress tensed, unsure what was happening, then she heard a sound in the air and lifted her head. She spotted a massive dragon in the sky that asked them what was happening. Kedon walked up to Gristle and greeted her while Astras stared in shock at his appearance. Platy climbed down from the dragon and ran to the hero. She asked if he was okay, and the boy said he was. Arwana asked where she had been, and Gristle said they had been looking for tonkatsu eggs in the mountains. The strays fell to the ground, and the dragon explained that afterward they accidentally saw a demon ship in the ocean, got curious, and returned, and the dragon asked whether this lower demon would kill Kadhin. She warned that harming her master would make her an enemy, and said she saw demons as worms, so their race would be destroyed. Startled, Keaton stopped Vale and the dragon and apologized. Then the boy approached the demon on the ground. He made an offer. They said they would let her go home if she promised not to be their enemy. Everyone stood behind the hero. Estra interrupted him and warned him not to dare insult her because she was one of the 4 heavenly kings. Her whole body trembled with fear. Forced to steady herself, she fought to control that fear since showing weakness would disgrace the demon lord's power. Clenching her hand, she rose to her feet and cried that she had a counteroffer, pointed her sword at Kidden, and said he must fight her one-on-one, and if he won she would listen to him. Grinzel, furious at the demon's insolence, vowed to roast the demon now, but Kidden stopped her and said he had decided that no one would stop him from living in this world. Plotty blushed and felt flattered. Raising his sword, the boy accepted the demon lord's challenge. The woman thought he was reckless and also took a fighting stance. Looking at him, she decided that even with strong allies, he was still just a simple man she could grab. She looked closer at the sword and realized it was the legendary dark sword, Dr. Schwartz. It fell from her hands and she passed out. Surprise swept the group and Kedon asked why she fainted. Grinsel suggested burying her so she could fertilize their fields. Kedon stopped the dragon. After some time, Grinsel flew at a great height, holding Astra in her paw as Astra trembled with fear. Keaton told her to go home, which she didn't like, and the sailors were so shocked to see the veil that they abandoned Astra's and retreated. Coming to her senses, the girl turned to the dragon and asked why she served the man. Grinsel sighed contemptuously and replied with an ominous look that she was under no obligation to explain anything to her. She smiled, thinking no one should know how exquisite the master's dishes were, as Astros kept flying in her paw, and she wondered who the man was who had subdued 2 disasters. After some time had passed since the recent events, Keaton, Platy, and Gristle watched in surprise. Astras the Heartless stood before them with 2 demons. The boy asked why they had come. The goblin who brought them said they wanted to speak with him. Platy charged at Astras, shouting for her to leave. Kedon asked Platy to calm down and ask what had happened. The 2 demon girls beside her politely asked to be heard, and said they had been kicked out of the Demon King's army. Surprised, the heroes asked for her side, and she said it was not true. adding that she had been the only one kicked out of the army, so she told the demons to go back. They asked how she could say that after they had sworn to serve her for the rest of their lives. Grinsel, in human form, was displeased to see this. She turned into a dragon and told them to be quiet or she'd burn them to ashes, and Keaton stopped her by threatening to leave her without dinner. The dragon turned back, and the stunned demons hid behind Astras. The boy asked why Astras had been left out of the Demon King's army. The woman lowered her head and said she had failed the mission to capture the princess. Her monster squad had been defeated, and that was not all. She warned that letting a dragon run wild on the battlefield was a serious offense. Kaiden asked what kind of dragon had been on the battlefield between humans and demons. He looked at Vale, who folded her hands behind her head and said she had been asked to take her back. Asteris summed up that this was why she had been stripped of the title Sky King and banished from the country. A demon girl beside her said the war meeting felt strange because the decision had been rushed while the demon lord was away, as if everyone was trying to get rid of her. Another girl said Mr. Reverian is behind this because he's always up to something, so it must be his doing. Estrez stopped them and said there was no need to blame anyone, because in the demon army strength was everything, so the failed mission was her fault since she had been helpless. Keaton understood that her exile was caused by the recent unrest, and the demons mourned because Astras had joined the army. Vale asked angrily what she wanted to talk about, and Platy cautiously clarified that it was about responsibility for what she had done. Astras replied no, saying she needed to start a new life and wanted to know something. She said the local orcs and goblins were stronger than her and unusually self-aware and able to speak, which was normally impossible, and that Kidden was worshipped by two world plagues, the dragon and the king of the undead. With a clenched fist, she said she wanted to know why and that she needed the answer, then knelt down and asked to be allowed to work for the boy. Vale and Platyfish were stunned, and the man calmly said yes. The girls objected angrily that they were against it, and the man replied shyly that he didn't even know whether working here would help her at all. Since she had decided to leave her past life, settle in new lands and start over, he offered to help. Vale laughed cruelly and said they would try to kill him again later. Kidden met her gaze and said he would have to accept the challenge. The girl thought everyone would benefit from this. When the demons next to Asteris asked to stay, Kidden said he would be very glad but warned immediately that no blood could be shed while they were here, and that was his condition. Volley was unhappy that the owner was so naive, and Platy sighed, saying this was very similar to Kidden, while Astras bowed her head, agreed, and added that as long as she was here she would obey and take on any job. She asked for an order. Kidden was delighted and said he'd like to ask for something in that case. The demon girls nearby introduced themselves as Badami and Baelna. After a while, the demons worked with hoes in the fields, unsure why they had been sent there. Not sure they could handle it, Kidding considered assigning them chores around the house. Astros insisted she could handle it, saying it was no harder than using a weapon, but Emmy objected. She noticed Estrus digging in the same spot, but Tommy explained it was a hoe used to loosen the soil and make beds, and Estrus realized she had been mistaken. Kidding was surprised she knew this, and Tommy explained she had experience. Because Astros and Belena were aristocrats, their skin never developed calluses, so she asked that everything be given to her. Astor objected and said she had decided to serve the great saint no matter the cost, and could handle it. Keaton was glad these demons were so diligent. After that, the man said Batamy would go with the goblins to make beds, and they said they understood. He then told Astros and Baleen to plant seeds in those beds every 30 centimeters, and the girls said they understood. After a while, they resumed work. Astras and Baelna sat down to plant while Batemy loosened the soil. Esther winced and felt sharp pain in her lower back, unable to rise to her full height. She had not expected the job to be so hard, and Baelna let out a sharp scream. Astros asked what had happened, and the girl said there was something wriggling in the ground. Astor's lower back jerked and snapped, and she screamed, sometimes from pain, sometimes from disgust at the ground, and Kaiden watched and thought it was too much for them. Eventually, Astros walked beside the orcs among the goblins. She chuckled and said that since the hunt was further away, she could show herself. She asked Platy what they were hunting. The girl loaded the square bore because Kedon wanted to replenish his meat supply. Asteris asked to be given this job so she could make up for the field work. Footsteps sounded ahead, and when they looked they realized the noise came from the deepest part of the forest, so everyone froze. A group of square boars charged into view in front of them, and Astros shouted to Baelna and Batemy to get ready. Something shot past Astro's head as orcs and goblins cut down the boars with quick swings of their axes. Instantly the whole flock collapsed, and the humanoid monsters kept silent, having accepted this as routine. Astras was surprised by how strong they were, and Belina told them to check their tools because the axes and sickles were made of mana metal. Plotty sighed and said their tools and weapons were made entirely of mana metal, calling them extravagant, and the demons couldn't believe it, saying metal that pure was rare to see. Then Baitme said she now understood why they were so strong. Astras said it was not so. She said those guys were already strong when they first met, and they didn't even have weapons, and Balina and Baitme couldn't believe it. Platy said that if Astras was interested, her hoe was also made of mana metal. The girls shuddered, thinking the problem wasn't the weapon, but that they didn't know how to use it. She screamed that they could no longer just stand there, and that we were going to hunt too. After a while the pack of boars lay dead. Platy thanked everyone for their help. Astras, gasping after taking several hits, said they had not even started. The orcs and goblins stood as if nothing had happened. Given the boar's strength and the mountain hunt, she hadn't expected it to be so hard. Platy licked her lips, rolled up her sleeve, and said it was time to butcher them. After that, she went to the bodies and began processing them, saying they could not be carried as they were, so she would cut them up and freeze them. Later at home, Cadden was making soup in a saucepan, tasting it as he cooked. Platy called out that they were back. The man turned around smiling and said it was just in time. Calling from the kitchen that dinner was ready, he noticed dark demons and asked what had happened. Platy replied that the whole day had not gone as they'd expected. With her head bowed, Estrez said she had once been one of the 4 heavenly kings, feared by both humans and mermaids, and had come here after losing that title, and the locals here were incredibly strong with weapons that were unmatched. She realized she was helpless. Kitten replied confidently that she was not helpless. This surprised the woman. The young man explained it was not about her strength or influence, but about those who had sworn to be with her, looking at Badimim and Baelna. They added that this means she has a power called charisma, so she should believe in herself more and open new paths. Inspired, the girls looked at each other, clenched their fists with excitement, and smiled. Kitten said it was time to eat. Vale was very pleased. The man suggested they eat outside since the weather was nice. They set the dishes on the table in the yard. The food looked very appetizing and they sat around the table. Aster, who had never seen dishes like that, asked what it was, and Vale asked too, so Keaton explained it was grilled boar meat with ginger and tangerine soup. The girls doubted the explanation and accepted the plates reluctantly. Astras tasted the food and began to cry from how delicious it was, which startled Kedon. Plotty and Vale were clearly happy and ate quickly, and Kaiden was glad to see it and told him to let them eat as much as they wanted, enjoy themselves, and try again tomorrow. Earlier, Astras carried a basket of food and said she had not seen Kedon and Plotty anywhere. Baelna said they had business at sea. Asteris nodded, said she was done picking vegetables, and asked what else needed doing, and Belina said she needed to weed and clean the house. Vale ordered Asteris to plow and get to work. Lying on the porch, she said anyone who does not plow will die of hunger. Temmie asked what that meant for her. Vale grew angry and demanded to know what the lesser demon was muttering. She sighed and said she would look after the house. Tammy and Belina did not object, though they were very unhappy, and they shouted they would guard the house until Keaton came. On the shore, Platy was in the water with her legs turned back into a tail, and she told Cadden, who sat beside her, that sometimes she needed to return to that form. The man asked if living in the sea was easier than living on land, and the girl looked at him. Confidently, she replied that it was the same everywhere because her way of becoming human was top quality. So it's convenient for her to live on land. Kaido smiled because he knew it wasn't true but appreciated his wife's tact. He asked what she wanted to talk about, and she said that sea monsters come ashore here. She said there are dungeons and caves in the mountains and in the ocean, and monsters come out of them. Keaton asked if fish fertilizer, herring, and starfish are monsters too. Platyfish nodded and said some were useful and some were not, and there was another monster among the ocean's 5 strongest. Kitten's face darkened. Platyfish said such an opponent would be easy. He refused to let her go alone because he could not breathe underwater. She smiled, said she was prepared, then pulled out the plexus and explained it let her breathe underwater. She handed it to the boy and told him to put it in his mouth and chew, saying he could breathe while he chewed. He began to chew, and Platyfish warned him not to swallow because it was not ready and he would not be able to breathe if he swallowed it. Keaton swallowed and said he understood. She froze, asked why he had swallowed it, then handed him another and beckoned him to swim after her. He dove under the water, tried to breathe, and was surprised that he could. Platy stood before him, waving happily and beckoning him to follow, and she was very beautiful. Living on land, she looked less like a mermaid, and Keaton began to forget she really was one, so he swam after her, glad that such a beautiful princess was his wife. Kitten blushed, and the girl, seeing this, asked about his breathing and whether he was chewing, and Kitten waved his hands to show everything was fine. Feeling something, Pleiade turned and said that salt minerals and other elements gave off a strong sense of malice. Keaton turned to look in the same direction and wondered what was there. A huge fish with glowing eyes appeared in front of the heroes. Plotty screamed that she was the spotted moray eel. The eel let out a loud cry and swam straight toward the heroes, frightening Ketan. The girl shouted that she wouldn't let her move, told the guy to sort it out, and then threw the potion flasks. They crashed into a spotted moray eel, which caught fire and screamed loudly, and the man, surprised by the fire underwater, noticed his wife's amazement. Drawing his sword, he looked at it and swung with all his might, splitting the spotted moray eel in front of them. Platyfish showed her husband was the strongest of all, and the man was very surprised by his strength as the fish's body sank to the bottom. Kaiden spotted it and waved his hands, and Platy said the problem was solved so they could go home. The man drew attention, signaled there was more, then began to dive to the bottom. He cut the seaweed at the base with his sword, and many did not understand, saying it was useless even for magic, but its rapid growth caused trouble. She asked him what he wanted to do with them, and he smiled. They floated to the surface, and after a while on land he began cutting them, humming about the taste. They were cooking on the rocks in a pot. Kitten said the seaweed was like wakame and wanted to cook it with the moray eel. Plady asked whether Kitten really wanted to make a dish with moray eel and seaweed. Keenan decided to try it. Picking up the plate, he said it only needed a sprinkle of salt and pepper to be ready. Wakame and moray eel soup from another world. Skeptical Platyfish tried it and immediately beamed with happiness at the taste. She couldn't believe this ingredient, which seemed useless, tasted so delicious and crunchy. Kitten was glad she liked it. Even if it seemed useless, it proved useful. He added that it would take a lot of salt to remove all the slime, so he would leave the moray eel there and go home. Platyfish said she would help. She also said the taste would surprise everyone, and her respect for her husband's sword. They finished the dish. Embarrassed, the man asked about it again, and Plotty told him not to doubt it. Kitten added it was not only his merit because many people helped him. Plotty looked surprised, and the young man reminded her that they'd begun living here together, and the neighbors and new residents had made it too lively. He's come to see how important support is. Plotty was flattered by the speech, but the man said he'd realized something else. They needed to spend more time together. The girl was surprised, and Kitten said they were newlyweds. Blushing, Plotty accepted when the hero suggested she come back to swim with him again, just the two of them. She said she had to build a new underwater breathing device so he could speak too. The man nodded. At Demon Castle, the man explained that Astras the Heartless, one of the 4 kings, had been expelled from the army and banished, and in front of him they began discussing the meeting to choose the next king. A man interrupted them and asked who would allow them to banish Astras. One of the men replied that, as had already been said, she had made a serious mistake. With a gloomy face, the man called the speaker, Reverian the Poor, and told him not to act poor since it was his own doing. The man rose, drew his sword from its sheath, and pressed it to Raverian's neck, calling it treachery. Trembling with fear, Arveri begged for mercy, calling the man with the sword the demon Lord Zadin. Zidding told Raverian to sort out the mess before he returned, at least enough so Zidding could take responsibility. Raverian bowed his head, and a nearby man turned it on, held out a note, and said these were the coordinates. Zedin said he understood, then thought of Kitten, and noted that even a demon lord could act when enraged. A short time earlier, other heroes had been summoned. Momoko Akisaka was a very ordinary girl. More precisely, she really was that ordinary. She was fighting a horde of monsters with a second-tier divine scythe spell. With a single swing, the ground between the girl and the horde collapsed, killing all the monsters as they fell onto the broken earth. Summoned from another world, Momoko gained the skill Divine Side Level 2 and now fights demons for humans. The girl struggled to get used to this world, with no basic amenities or electronics, poor food and clothing, bread that could kill a person, fleece, jump on the bed, and rough clothes that made her skin itch. Many of those summoned failed to adapt and died. When Momoko was called, there were about 10 people left, and she wonders how many remain. She thought he might be gone, the man who turned out to have no skills at all. In this harsh world you cannot survive without skills, but Momoko Akisaka is different because her exceptional skill makes the king value her, and she must remember how lucky she is. That's why she fights alone, wielding one of the world's strongest skills to cut through monsters. The army of demons seems endless. Monsters are everywhere you look. Knowing this is the front line, she looks at them and decides she will not lose. She cannot lose, so she will protect this world. Suddenly, a huge dragon flew over the girl, fighting the Demon King's army, freezing everyone below in fear, and Momoko Akisaka couldn't believe her eyes as she shouted that it was a dragon. He was one of the world's plagues. No one could take their eyes off him, but seeing him meant death, and even among them he was a monster, so everyone wondered why he was here. Not even Momoko, a summoned hero whose skill kills in one hit, could defeat this monster. The others shouted that they were retreating because he would wipe them out with a single breath. People feared the dragon had come to destroy them all. It landed. Silence fell when he spoke. He ordered them to listen, speaking to everyone as if they belonged to lower tribes. People were stunned, not expecting dragons to speak. The dragon said she was Grazer's daughter, the great king of dragons of Grinzelvale, and that today the master had told her to return the slob he had thrown from his paw. Astras the Heartless collapsed in front of everyone, and the demons recognized her at once and told the others to catch her quickly. Vale said Astras was meant to die, but the master chose otherwise, and he ordered everyone to listen and not miss a word. She warned that whether demon or human, anyone who insults her master will have their cities burned to the ground by her flame, and she sent a fiery breath from her mouth that everyone nearby saw as a flash of fire. The magic left humans and demons barely able to stand, most collapsing to the ground, and Momoko was surprised by its terrible power. Vale announced that everyone must know her master was Saint Coden. Her command was that they never forget his name because anyone who opposed the saint would become her enemy. Then she flew away. Many people sitting on the ground spoke Saint Quidon's name and were surprised that even the dragon obeyed him, though no one knew who he was. Now at Kidden and Platy's home, they had built several buildings and plowed many fields in front, and Kidden was eating with chopsticks and drinking from a glass, smiling with satisfaction at the taste. Rising, he said he had to work in the fields again today, glanced at the mountains and the distant horizon as he stretched, then heard someone approaching and turned around. A man's voice asked if he was Saint Kidden. The boy looked surprised, agreed, and asked who the man was, and the man replied that he was the demon lord Zadin, leaving Kidden confused. Temi and Baelna called out to Kedon, joyfully saying they'd finally succeeded. They carried the animal's body on a stick and said Mrs. Astras had finally caught her prey after trying very hard. Her expression changed when Zidane said her name, and she looked up, not expecting to see him. Surprised, the demon lord said she was indeed here. The woman looked at him in confusion and asked how he had found her, and the man replied that her subordinates had left a code. Butemi and Belina watched the scene with joy, and Astros wondered why the demon lord had come. The demon lord said he had come to visit her. The subordinates watched expectantly, and Kidden could not grasp the mood. Astra admitted she had failed the mission, so she was no longer one of the four kings and was of no use to him. She said Zadin had always cared for her, but she did not want to be criticized later. The demon lord said excitedly that he did not care because she was very important to him. The woman felt embarrassed by the words. Platy was stunned, and Vale said the drama irritated her. After a while, they went into the house. Kidden made hot tea for everyone. Zidane apologized for the trouble his presence caused them. Zadin introduced himself as the supreme ruler of all demons. Keaton asked whether that made him the leader of the demon country. Zadin nodded. The hero asked whether his leaving the country would cause any problems. Zadin said no. He explained that the demon lord's main duty is to protect the country from humans. That mission was given by the previous lord, and to carry it out, he fights on the battlefield every day. Kidden said he understood, and Plates added that if you fight so much there is probably no one waiting for you at home, and Zidane replied that this is why he is glad to have Asteris, because she is always responsive, very capable, and simply irreplaceable. Deeply embarrassed, she said she did not deserve the praise, and her subordinates were pleased to see her reaction. Kidden said he would never banish Astras. Zadana agreed and said Astras had been summoned to a military court and sentenced to banishment while commanding on the front lines. They did not ask the overlord and acted on their own. Sedan said Astras was blamed for the dragon's accidental appearance that had thrown the battlefield into chaos. Vale hummed indifferently, and Cadden listened, lost and silent. The man said that by the time he returned, Astras was gone. Kidden deduced he had come here looking for her. Zedin took Astro's hand and said he was so glad she was there because he did not know what he would do without her. He thought he had lost her forever. Plotty replied that everything between them was clear and their love was obvious, while the woman grew embarrassed and said they were just childhood friends. She said that nothing would turn out well for them because the ruler had to care for the whole country and their case did not deserve his attention. Fuming through the whole conversation, Rincel Vale finally snapped, ordered everyone to be quiet, and shouted that it didn't matter whether he was the master or not, he could take Asteris and leave. Then Zidane asked who she was and Asteris was terrified. The woman said it was Grinzel Vale, the dragon that had flown onto the battlefield, and stared at the demons with contempt. Zadin said in confusion that it couldn't be, staring at the girl in front of him. Vale said angrily that she had been asked to return Astra's and did not like straining her wings for a rude girl who had shown up on her master's doorstep. Kirin called out to Vale with displeasure, and Vale said she understood and would stay silent while Zidane watched them in confusion. Turning to Kedadin, he said Astros kept dangerous company and her life belonged to them, while the demon lord clenched his fist and vowed to bring her back at any cost. Standing up, he calmly asked to be allowed to fight him, which surprised Kedin, and the man said he took his title seriously and had to show his fighting spirit. When the hero began to deny it, Platyfish told him he might not even dream about it, and added that her husband was the master of Vale, one of the world's disasters, and that an undead king was here as well. She asked if he had heard of such a thing and then said he could not win. Zidane asked if that was true and Astras confirmed it. Zidane did not dispute it, and the woman belonged only to herself so she could go with Zidane. The hero said she came to him to find a purpose in life and discover her abilities, and since someone cares about her and wants her to return, she should pay attention to him. He asked about her decision, saying Zidane had told her about his feelings and she should try as well. She felt flattered, her subordinates were happy, and Vale was relieved to know she could leave. Holding his hand, Astra said she wanted to follow him always, whether on the battlefield or in the afterlife, and asked to be allowed to stay near him. Zidane agreed and told her to go home and never leave him again, and she was happy about it. Her subordinates were glad their mistress was no longer a loser without a title. Vale was pleased, and Caden shed a tear. Platy stood up from the couch and angrily told them to stop. Everyone looked at her in confusion. When Kin asked what was wrong, the girl said that with all due respect to the demon lord, he was very naive. Smarter than the others, Woodlouse addressed the man as if he were her future husband. When Zidane asked who she was, Platy introduced herself as the mermaid princess. She then said the demon nobles wanted to arrange a political marriage between her and Zidane, and the demon lord froze, stood up, and demanded to know who had said that since it was the first time he had heard of it. The man sat down beside Astras and said there was nothing between him and Platy. Kedad nodded to show he understood. He explained that whoever marries the mermaid princess will receive the mermaid's resources as well. Platy nodded in agreement. Quoting the demon nobles, she said the mermaids should ally with them and marry the princess to their king. Asteras's subordinates were surprised by this policy. Platy said that if you think about it, the demon lord didn't know about his marriage or the expulsion of his most loyal supporter, so one of his subordinates is plotting against him. Every demon instantly concluded it could only be Reverian. Platy said that after she became Keaton's wife, Reverian sent Astras after her. When she failed the mission, Reverian eliminated Astras to strengthen his power. Zidane realized that until he faced him, returning Astras would be pointless, because everyone would keep reminding him of her failure. Plenty warned that at best he'd lose his supporters, and at worst be forced to abdicate the throne. Kedon was shocked by this, but Failed didn't care. The hero apologized because the man was sincere and honest, and he hated the idea of a scoundrel ruling the land of demons. The hero's words stunned Zidane and Astras, and Platy said all the problems could be solved at once, then called to the demon lord and Astras, telling them to return not as a lord and a subordinate, but as husband and wife. She suggested they marry on the spot. The demons reacted with shock and confusion. Timmy and Baelna were delighted and could hardly believe the demon lord and Lady Astras were getting married. Zidane said it was unexpected for him, and he wasn't sure about it either. Floody asked if he was dissatisfied and what he was unhappy about. Blushing with embarrassment, Astras said no way, and Floody told her not to react like that, explaining that a woman becoming queen would be the worst possible outcome for the conspirators who wanted her downfall. She said the fastest way for any demon to get close to power was to marry a daughter or sister to the Lord. Kidding nodded. He said that if Sedan and Astras were married, the conspirators would be left with nothing, and he flatly confirmed it. Then she said that was what they had decided. The embarrassed Astras, who had not said a word, wanted to object. The lady glared at her, and the woman asked what she would have to do if they got married. The girl smiled and said it was a good question. She said that to marry you must exchange vows before God. Zidane and Astros held each other's hands and reflected on that vow. The demon's followers were pleased, and Cadden asked for details. Platy said she would explain now, and excited, told them they had to take the vows before God so no one could challenge their marriage. He suddenly remembered that in his previous world, to officially register a marriage, you had to fill out a form at the district office. He still asked what exactly needed to be done for the oath, and Platy praised him for asking and said they would find out now. After a while, the undead king appeared and asked why he had been summoned. Zedin was stunned to see an immortal king. He also confirmed the rumors that the Cent had 2 global disasters under his control. Vale was angry to discover he had been told this many times before. Zedin stared at the yawning Vale and declared the child a dragon. Estrez confirmed. Kedin asked Platy why she had called the undead king. Smiling, the girl said he would be a witness at their wedding. Zadin and Astra were shocked by the news. Platy said the undead king had once been a high priest, so the god would watch through him while they exchanged vows. Kedon remembered the marriage ceremony from his world. Platyfish asked excitedly what the undead king thought, and the king said Zadin and Astras were from the demon race, and that, though he had become undead, he had once served the human race. Shuddering, she sank to her knees and said she had made a mistake. Keaton did not understand her reaction and asked what was wrong. Platy explained that each race worships different gods. Humans worship Zeus, mermaids worship Poseidon, and demons worship Hades. In other words, each race believes in its own god. He missed the girl's meaning and thought it was like calling a monk to church. She screamed about what she had done. The undead king said he would try, and Plenty was surprised that he could. Over more than 1,000 years, the immortal king had gathered a great deal of knowledge and said that despite different religions he could still pray. Platy was very happy with this news. Turning to Zadin and Astras, she asked if they were okay with it. The woman replied that of course she was not and thanked her. The undead king raised his hand and said he would begin, then began casting a spell asking for prosperity to bear fruit. Temi and Baelna looked around in fear, and Cadhin and Vale remained wary. The king continued casting a spell, saying he would draw them into his depths and share the mother goddess's blessing, so this place would become a sanctuary, and he asked that it be cleansed in any way desired. The surrounding roar grew louder as the undead king shouted and raised his hand. A huge magical seal appeared in the sky and lightning struck. Strez and Zidane looked around, and Cadden asked what was happening. Platy said it was the undead king's prayer and that the air felt like it was pressing down. They noticed something appearing behind the huge air currents and looked in that direction. At the center of the magic seal, a giant man appeared in the sky, holding a staff and wearing a cloak and a crown. Aster immediately recognized him as Hades, the god of the underworld. Keaton screamed in shock at the revelation. The undead king wasn't expecting this and said calmly that he'd gone too far and had summoned the god himself, while Platy was amazed anyone could do such a thing. He said he planned to create a sacred space for a ceremony, so a god appearing was strange. Platy shouted that it didn't matter anymore and asked what they should do. Hades spoke up, saying no one had called him in years and asking why he was there. The Temi and Balina immediately assumed Zeus's children had started the last war and were terrified. Zadin knelt and denied it. He said the war was being fought with mixed results. The demons must not lower their guard, but Hades had nothing to fear. The god of the underworld asked why he had been summoned. Zadin apologized and introduced himself as a demon lord. Kidden was surprised to be talking to a god. The man bowed his head and said he wanted to marry the lady of his heart. They planned a wedding and prayed for the god of the underworld's blessing. Instead, they accidentally summoned him in person. The king of the undead apologized as well. Sedan asked them to accept their sincere apologies for disturbing his peace. Upon learning he had been summoned by the immortal king, Hades said there was nothing surprising about it. He then agreed, saying Zidane must have no other wives to receive his blessing, and asked the Lord, who was bowing before him, whether he had vowed to love only one woman for the rest of his life. Zidane said that was his wish and vowed that, as the Lord of Demons, he would marry only Asteris and spend the rest of his life with her. Hades replied that it was well said, extended his hand, and offered his blessing. Soon the weather returned to normal, and the underworld god vanished. Zadin rose from a kneeling position and took Astro's hand. He didn't think the god Hades was bad. They were all unhappy because he was so loud that their ears hurt. The king of the undead agreed and said he would be more careful with his prayers next time. Joyful Platy rushed to the demons and said it was wonderful they had received a direct blessing from God, since this was the strongest patronage of heaven. The undead king wished for good health, easy childbirth, and fertility, and said divine punishment would fall on anyone who tried to separate them. Temi and Belina were relieved they had succeeded, and Zidane said this was the demon's best proof of his love for Astras, while Kaiden thought an oath before God would be cooler than a marriage registration. The demon lord turned to Kidden and Platy and said he was deeply in their debt because, thanks to them, his dream of marrying Astras, which he had almost given up on, had come true. Astra's tears of happiness in her eyes said she would never forget their kindness. Kidan waved his hands and said he had done nothing, but he was truly happy for her. Astras was flattered by those words. Zedin asked whether they should return immediately to announce to everyone at home that she was now their queen. She refused Zadin and said she would stay here a little while longer. Zadin and Kidden were surprised by her decision. Grinzelvale became very unhappy and told the woman to leave. The woman said they were already married and should return to their own country. Kitten told the girl to stop. Then he asked Astros why she really wanted to stay, and Zidane watched her, confused. She said she had changed and learned a lot under Cadence's guidance and wanted to keep learning so she could become a worthy wife, then turned to Zadin. The man looked shocked but said the woman must have had her reasons, then turned to Kedon and asked him to look after Astra a little longer. Temmie and Blena watched them with concern. Kedon said he did not mind, which shocked Vale, who wanted to send them away as soon as possible to avoid sharing food. The hero added that he did not know how to help, since they had just gotten married and he felt awkward separating them. Zidane asked if they would mind him staying here for a while, and Astras was surprised while Kitten looked confused. He asked if there would be any harm in it, and Plotty and Vile were confused, but he did not ask if it would trouble the demon people, and the demon lord said that for a short time it would not. He explained the dragon had thrown both camps into chaos, so the troops would not move while information was gathered. Kitten shouted that he understood. Vale was angry to be blamed. Zedin asked if Kitten minded, and he said not at all, they could make themselves at home. Kitten then thought they would need to build a house for themselves too. She asked if they were all right in the head and reminded them there was a conspirator among them, saying that if so they would just leave him. They warned that without them he would keep plotting and asked if they really wanted that. Astro's subordinates, Platyfish and Kitten, thought about it. Zedin smiled confidently and said there was no need to worry because he had already taken care of it, laughing evilly as Kitten said admiringly that it was to be expected from the demon lord, while Vale was not pleased. She pointed at Zadin, called him strange because there was no ship, and asked how he got here. Platy and Kitten were also curious. The man explained that with teleportation magic you can travel instantly. If you have coordinates, you can move in the blink of an eye. Kitten said happily that it was very convenient. Zedin then turned to Astro's subordinate Belina, who shuddered as he told her she was, after all, one of the few spatial demons. She left a note with coordinates before coming here, and the demon lord used it to direct a port. Temmie hugged Balina and said she was fine, which embarrassed the girl. Balina replied that she felt uneasy about having to break up because of some conspiracy. Grateful, the demon lord thanked Balina for helping them, while Vale seized that she would never forgive Balina. Platyfish interrupted the conversation and said that, although she did not want to seem doubtful, other spatial magics existed. The girl asked if those magics would come here. Zadin told her not to worry. The coordinates for this place are encrypted. Unless the person who set them up provides the decryption key, the coordinates are useless. The demon lord added that no one else could perceive this place, and Keaton and Whale looked at him in surprise. Zidane explained that the demon race currently uses spatial and clairvoyant magic, and with those powers the magicians can see places far away. This whole area is surrounded by a protective field that cancels that magic. The heroes were surprised to hear this. Zedin said he had risked a lot using teleportation, but thanks to Balin he managed to follow here. Tammy gestured to her to show she was doing well. The demon lord realized they could not reach this place, nor even understand where it was. He did not say he understood. The boy wanted to know who had cast such a useful spell. Vale puffed out her cheeks in response. The undead king said such magic would be within a dragon's power if he was not mistaken. They looked at Vale. The human-shaped dragon sighed and said she had been exposed and confirmed her involvement, adding that after abandoning Astros on the battlefield, she returned and sealed the entire area with a barrier. Vale was still very angry because if Astros hadn't been there she would have eaten more. Belena was afraid of that. Kitten looked at Vale, knelt before her, and said she was very worried about him, and she was very grateful for that. The dragon said it was obvious because she was the only one who had to eat all the master's dishes, and with freeloaders still coming she would end up with nothing, which shocked Plotty and Astro's subordinates. Balan said she hated them because of the food, and Timmy and Astros nodded. Cadden put his hand on her hair, stroked it, and told her she was good and always protected him. She liked that and smiled in agreement. Keaton announced excitedly that today they'd hold a celebration for Astros and Zedin's wedding, and to reward Vale for her efforts. The undead king asked eagerly to join. Kitten smiled and agreed. Zadin and Astros thanked him. Later, they set up a table outside with a large spread of food. Kedden said he congratulated the demon lord and Asteris on their wedding. For the first time, Zidane tried the dishes. Astros watched him eagerly, and Baitme and Belina were pleased. The demon lord, surprised by the taste, said it was the first time he had tried such a delicious dish, and Kidden replied that he was very glad, then brought Vale a huge plate of meat, and she was very happy, holding 2 spoons. After tasting it, she opened her eyes and turned into a dragon, roaring and breathing fire, as she praised how delicious the food was. Kitten reprimanded her not to transform at the table or breathe fire. Changing back to human form, she said she had never tasted meat that good. Zedin was amazed that she really was a dragon, and Kedin smiled. He explained it was meat from a Kurosaki deer that Asterisk had caught for them that day. The woman had not expected that. After that, he said he had skillfully cut the meat and marinated it in magical spices, and Kitten realized that others, not just him, had helped prepare the dish, leaving Vale amazed. Then she laughed maliciously, saying it could not be any other way because all those lower creatures had to serve her master and her. Platyfish snapped that she would hit her now, and Astra said she would be glad to try. Kidding chuckled and said that despite that attitude, Vale had done a lot for them. Platy added that Vale still had a lot of work to do on her character. The girl tasted the meat and admitted that Vale was right after all, that her husband's dishes should remain secret, and Zidane agreed that such delicacies are not even seen in palaces. He nodded and said he now understood why the dragon wanted this place hidden. Astris thought anxiously. Pletty asked Cadden when he learned to cook so well. Cadden was surprised and said he lived alone and had to fend for himself, but he didn't do anything out of the ordinary. Thanks to the skill he received, he said he could recreate ingredients and dishes foreign to this world, and he believes it makes him a better cook. The man handed the plate to the undead king and said he was glad they liked it, whatever it was. Right then, Astra stepped up and asked if his dishes were a state secret. Vale said it was a state secret, and Kitten insisted it was a secret. Kneeling, the woman turned to the boy. He looked surprised and asked what had happened. Astra said she wanted to ask him again and asked him to take her into service and teach her what a good wife should be able to do. Kitten and the others were very surprised by these words. Plenty grew angry and demanded to know why Astros was asking someone else's husband about this. The woman apologized and gave a guarded chuckle, saying she couldn't do it. Plotty frowned and said she could only swing her hand chops. Kedon reassured her that she was good at other things too. He told her he grew crops and cooked delicious dishes because of her. Plotty was very happy and looked at him lovingly. Kitten turned to the demon queen Astras and said it would be better if someone like Koku looked after her. She refused, insisting she must overcome every difficulty herself as the demon lord's obedient wife. Baitme and Baelina were proud of their mistress. Cadden smiled and noted her sincerity. Zedin paused, turned to him and asked if he could train too, and Cadden was surprised and asked what he meant. A man asked him if he wanted to take the wedding training to Zadon agreed, and said it was a very interesting place. This place offers not only the kitchen, but also the harvest for their own buildings, and he finds everything fascinating, so he understands why Astros wants to study here. He also wants to match the woman's wish to support her, the way her husband does. He also explains how married partners should support each other, like Keaton does. Flattered by those words, he heard Platyfish say it was no surprise, because he was unlike other kings who only sat prettily in their castles. Sedan reiterated that he was counting on St. Kitten, and Asteris agreed. Sometime later, the orcs and goblins were building a new building. Zedin worked with them and asked Keaton how he was doing. Keaton said he was doing great. He said he was very good with his hands and appreciated it. At that moment, Astros called out to the man. She entered wearing an apron and mittens, carrying a tray of food and saying it was ready. Zidane blushed deeply. Astros, surprised, asked why he reacted that way, and Zidane said it was nothing special, thinking he was in heaven. The hero sat down at the table outside again, piled high with food. Keaton talked about how delicious it was. Vale supported him by eating quickly, and Platyfish praised Astros, noticing the Demon King was crying from the taste. He asked the name of the dish, and Asteris said it was Nikujaba, with Kedden pointing out Asteris had made most of it herself and Zadin unable to believe it. Because she was a swordsman, he said she was already used to handling a kitchen knife, so she only needed to learn the techniques and the qualities of the ingredients and seasonings before she could leave. With Baitme and Belena's support, she thanked them and then considered what else was needed for the engagement. Amy said it was clothes and that they needed to learn to sew. Then she looked at the Demon King and noted he was wearing a normal shirt. Zidane said he got it from St. Kidane. Bitemio was surprised Kedon did that, but Kedon agreed and said that as a man he could make clothes for other men too. He's already promised to make clothes for Platyfish, but he can't come up with a design. He also said he already had some fabric, took it from the table, and asked us to wait a moment. Kedon brought 3 rolls and said this was all he had, but he was surprised and said excitedly that she had never seen such beautiful fabric before. He said he had explored a mountain dungeon earlier and found a caterpillar that produced threads. As an experiment, he brought some of them home and built special enclosures, which surprised Plotty. Keaton explained how he got the chance to make fabric from caterpillars, and everyone fell silent in surprise. Temi, holding the roll of fabric in her hands, could not believe it was possible to make fabric from caterpillar excrement. Balina, however, said his ideas were too unusual for this world, as one would expect. Then Batemi's eyes lit up, and she said it was okay to make girls' clothes from fabric made from caterpillars. Keating asked if she could do it, and Aster's subordinate agreed, saying her parents owned a fabric store, so she knew all this. Asteris was surprised because she did not know this. Belina called it wonderful, Temi asked to have it, and Cadden replied that she was his savior, so Asteris volunteered to help since it was part of her training. Batemi then offered to start by making clothes for Miss Plady, and the girls smiled and agreed, curious to see what they would make. Batemi took out a rope and said that once everything was settled she would start by measuring its parameters, then pulled the rope with an evil smile, leaving Platyfish confused, and making Kitten think it was impossible for him. She also said she knew they were making clothes for Platyfish first, but that she would make clothes for everyone, and she politely asked to be allowed to measure everyone. Platyfish asked how she wanted them to undress. Then she moved her hands slightly, making Batemi scream and blush deeply. She wondered whether Platy had always gone without underwear. The girl asked what commando meant. She remembered that when she first met her husband, he reacted the same way. Asteris pointed out she was a mermaid and didn't know she had to wear clothes on her lower half. Platyfish asked whether this was a problem, and Batemi, surprised by the question, said it was. Astros said that for both the demons and the people living on the surface here, exposing their lower half in public is a crime. Plenty shouted at that and asked why no one had told her about it. Asteris said no one had thought she would walk like that. The mermaid princess then remembered seeing her brother put something on his body, and she told me it was what they called underwear. Platy said in summary that lingerie was formal wear meant for diplomatic address, but Tammy thought Platy still considered it formal. After that, she eagerly asked for everything, promising to show why those clothes were so wonderful. Plenty replied that she did not fully understand, but was counting on her. The girl began taking measurements, and Batemi asked Petty to suck in her stomach, which made Petty blush. Petty said she had never been so upset about her husband's food before, and Batemi said that was normal. Continuing her measurements, the girl said Miss Astro's belly was fuller than she'd imagined. Belina said it was the power of love, and Astros, embarrassed, told her to be quiet. Vela wondered what those pests were doing. Once the work was done, Butami said happily, the ruffles on her dress were inspired by sea waves and their blue color, and they suited a mermaid princess like Platy. Kitten and Zedden also liked it very much. Batemi asked the girl if she liked it. Platy said it was very unusual and that she was pleased. Kitten thanked her and said he was very happy. Batemi felt embarrassed by those words. Platy approached him and he said it suited her. She said Batemi had also made her underwear. Caden felt embarrassed, and Platy asked whether that was unacceptable too. The man agreed. The mermaid princess said it did not matter because it was wonderful when her brother did it. Keaton decided that next time he would definitely be that close for his wife's brother. Vale kept staring at Platy's clothes the whole time, formed a fireball in her hand, and threw it at Platy. The girl screamed, asking what she was doing as she stared at the ball. Kitten was confused too and asked what was wrong, assuming she was jealous. Vale told him to be quiet and just watch. The flames went out and the dress remained completely undamaged, and the mermaid princess watched with puzzlement. Touching it, she noticed there were no burn marks, and Vale explained the fabric contained a lot of anti-magic. In human form, the dragon said she was sure it also had strong defensive power, and thought the dress was much better than ordinary armor. Platy asked Batemi what she had done to him, and Batemi, confused, said she had done absolutely nothing. Balna said that if that was true, she wanted to know why. Platy suggested the caterpillar might have that ability. They asked Kid if he had done anything with the caterpillars, and the boy said he had only handled them gently while hoping to make good clothes for Platyfish. Vale said she was sure of it, and explained the orcs and goblins had changed after meeting Keaton, so probably the same thing had happened to this caterpillar. The boy said he understood. Vale was surprised. This marked the birth of another legendary armor, and Temi said it was not armor but fashion. They all turned to Batemi and told her to hurry and make the same armor for her, but she still objected that it was not armor, and Kitten was grateful for such durable clothing. Noting that the Demon King's clothes were originally cotton, meant for futons, he suggested they could also ask Boatme to remake them. Zidane noted this was another one of those daily surprises, and when a store looked at him, it caught Zidane's attention. She noticed his clothes were a bit torn, and guessed he must have gotten caught on something while working. Noticing a small cut on the side, he said he couldn't believe he'd made a hole in the shirt Kitten had given him. Astra offered to fix it, then became embarrassed and admitted she had only recently learned it, so she wasn't very good yet, and the demon lord looked at her, thanked her, and said he would leave it to her. Everyone watched as Zadin took off his shirt, and Asterisk stitched the hole in it, and Kitten thought it would be fine for the demon king to keep the shirt a little longer. The whole scene unfolded in the human kingdom. A voice said it hated the dragon. It was the king's voice. Sipping from a glass, the king thinks the dragon has brought the war to a dead end. The advisor reports that the frontline generals still do not know why the dragon appeared, so they advise the army to hold its position. The king is outraged at the army and its generals for their cowardice. He then asks for information about the dragon's master. The asker identifies the master as St. Kitten. The advisor says there is no information on the matter. The king sips his drink and calls all these people useless. The advisor apologizes sincerely. The king throws the glass to the floor as the advisor watches, then orders another glass of freshly squeezed fish juice, and the advisor immediately agrees. The advisor cannot understand how the king can drink this nasty stuff, and the king says the situation is simply terrible. Sighing, he thinks they could have won the centuries-old war. His Majesty Junxus the 18th must end the war between humans and demons. To win, he used all of his country's mana to summon heroes from a parallel world. The king believes that if they defeat the demon race, they can use that power for themselves and for the country, and that will be enough. At that moment, an advisor brings fish juice to the king. His Majesty said they must deal with the dragon first, then asked the advisor whether he truly believed the dragon's master existed, and the advisor replied that many people also doubt it. The advisor warns that one wrong move will provoke him, and if the dragon appears again, destruction is inevitable. Sipping his juice, the king ignored the advisor's words. Suddenly, the thought of destruction reached him. Those words immediately brought him back to his senses. The king slams the glass on his throne, sending juice splashing everywhere. Forcing the advisor to find Sankethin, he knows that if Sankethin becomes one of their subjects, they will win. The advisor admits this may be true, but says he cannot find the person. The king tells him to form a search party of capable heroes. When the advisor reports rumors of a civil war in the demon capital, His Majesty grows angrier, says he doesn't care, and announces he will temporarily disband the army. He orders all the country's resources be dedicated to St. Codon. The advisor immediately agrees with the king. The king says he will definitely find St. Codon, and that is when humanity will declare its victory. In another place in time stood a traditional Japanese house where someone poured a drink into a cup while a man and a woman enjoyed a pleasant moment. The man says it's been 2 months since they arrived here. The girl adds they could learn a lot. After a few sips of his drink, he sighs solemnly and suggests to the girl that they get the feel of the sword again, then draws the sword and looks at it with excitement. The girl asks the demon king what is troubling him. He turns to Asteris and says the holy sword Ain't Loth is agitated. The demon king says the sword seems to resonate with someone, and Asteris falls silent for a moment before remembering something. After some time, they head to a place to find the holy Lord Cadden, who calls out that he is here and then asks the demon king what his concern is. Addressing the holy lord who holds a sword, the demon king asks about what Kitten is holding. Keaton says this sword is extremely useful, cuts through anything, and he just used it to cut mana metal. Platyfish says it is the sacred sword they retrieved from the dungeon of the teacher's undead king. She adds that the sword is being mishandled. The demon king never expected that the swindler's holy lord would possess the legendary devil sword Drishvar's. Norio says he intends to return it to his teacher, but the sword simply will not leave him. The Flesh Princess turns to Norio and says he was the one who protected her from the undead king. Norio replies that he had no choice then and didn't understand the power the gods had given him. Norio's words surprise the demon king and the girl beside him. The demon king says that according to the legend, he knows a saint's power granted by the gods can even become a hero's power. Norio remembers the undead king's teacher saying something similar, and the demon king turns to Lord St. Norio, thinking he may be one of the heroes humanity summoned from the parallel world. Norio thinks and tells the demon king there is some truth in his words, but the demon king doubts them. A bit excited, Norio says the whole team was right, and he really came from a parallel world. Nor, surprised by Norio's words, says he has no fighting skills and was kicked out of the war by the demon king. So Norio became a nomad on this land, living apart from other humans. The demon king cannot believe it. The girl turns to Zero and says it was supposed to be hard. Norio says it is not, kneels, and takes a handful of earth. Clenching his fist, he shows how he uses his power by growing a small flower from a handful of ordinary soil. The demon king is surprised the bud has sprouted and Noria says it is a gift the gods gave him, perfect for a peaceful life. Understanding everything, the Demon King said it might be a miraculous power but useless in battle, and that Noria must do something to become stronger than the undead king. Noria suddenly says he can use the power he was given for other purposes, for example, revealing the potential of anything he touches. The Demon King and Astros are shocked by Dry Schwartz's Devil Ball at full power, and Norio says being the strongest from raw power means nothing. The Demon King says in a slightly shaky voice that no one in this world could possess Norio's power. The Demon King considers the power the gods of the human race gave Norio, and then asks Norio if he wants to prove he is superior to humans and return to his kingdom. In response, Nor says he will not do it, as it might be rude toward the Demon King waging war against the human race, but Norio is not connected to any of them. Noria says he belongs to no one, so he can marry Princess Plotty. Princess Plotty, called shyly, turns to her husband. The Demon King turns to the Holy Lord Norio as well. He agrees the Light Lord is right, and without him they would become harsher toward the Mermaid race, which is also fighting in their war. The Demon King turns to St. Coden Norio, says his existence is vital to the world, and proposes a toast to hope and to everything going smoothly. St. Claude Norio looks at the Demon King with surprise and excitement at once. Then they shake hands and Norio confirms the Demon King's words. A while later, the Demon King and Asteris returned to the Lord Saint. The Demon King said they had punished those who had been enjoying themselves while they were away. The Demon King says they should purge the traitors a bit more to gain sympathy across the nation, and Norio is delighted with the Demon King's actions. Norio admires how well they planned everything and says he thought they were just enjoying their honeymoon. Vale asks the two girls standing behind why those two never ride with the Demon King. Slightly embarrassed by his worried question, the girls say that while they are here, the Demon King can return here whenever he wants. Vale immediately transforms into a dragon and says the Migum will take these girls to the land of demons. Norio tries to calm Vale down. The sea invites the Demon King to come to him to restock his food supplies, and one of the girls introduces herself as Baelna, saying she will fulfill her role by connecting the king to this land. The Demon King and Asterisks thank Baelna for her help. He is interested in another girl named Badami. Badami says she will stay here because she is Baelna's friend. Baitma asks the Demon King for permission, saying she would like to stay and keep making clothes. This would be a great option for Norio. Badama approaches Miss Astras with a slightly embarrassed but thoughtful expression. Astras does not understand anything. Suddenly, Emma finds herself wearing a gorgeous dress, but she says she sewed it for the one and only Miss Astras, with whom the Demon King fell in love. The girl felt a bittersweet happiness and thanked Baitme. The Demon King offers an asterisk to move forward, and she accepts immediately. A magic circle forms behind the Demon King and Asteris, and they say goodbye to all their friends and promise to meet them again. The entire company wishes them luck. After a while, a portal opens and the Demon King and Asterisk jump through. The Demon King turns to Astras and says that long ago he believed he could never end the war peacefully between demons and humans. Astruz is a little confused by the Demon King's words, but says the Lord Saint's existence made him realize what he gave up wasn't just a dream. Astros approaches the Demon King, who asks her to lend him the power for his dream, and she agrees without hesitation. Long before the Demon King returned to his country, Noria approached a man and asked him to compete, and that man was the Demon King, who considered the proposal for a long time. The Demon King really wants that experience and to learn how strong St. Kitten is. That said, Noria is not good at handling the ball, so they need something simple. An arena suddenly appears on the ground, and Norio suggests playing sumo, prompting the Demon King to ask him again. Norio explains that sumo is a game where two people stand facing each other. Explaining the rules, he says both fighters must stay inside the circle. The Demon King immediately understands and says they will fight until one of them cannot move. Noria objects. Noria steps closer to the Demon King, grabs him, and tells him to hold his opponent the same way. Norio says the Demon King may not hit his opponent, must try to pull him out of the circle, and cannot use any strikes. The king understood everything and said it looked simple, and Noria confirmed. The Demon King immediately took a stance and challenged Norio to a fight. Norio agreed, but only once, and the king gave his consent. They take positions on opposite sides of the circle and start the fight. They clash sharply without delay. Norio tries to push the Demon King out of the circle, but the Demon King stays inside. Norio suddenly remembers he knows many sumo techniques and tries one on the Demon King, who did not expect it and falls to the ground. The Demon King couldn't understand what had happened. Norio began to apologize, saying it was unexpected. The demon king asks the saint to leave the fight again. The Lord Saint agrees and calls Okubo at that moment, and a voice asks for help. The mermaid prince appeared. The mermaid prince turns to San Kitten, confused about what is happening. The demon king is baffled and surprised by the mermaid prince's presence. The mermaid princess is confused that the demon king is here. Norio asks the mermaid princess to calm down and offers him an idea. The demon king and the mermaid prince fight in a sumo match. Norio acts as the referee in the arena. He tells both opponents they are still in the ring and they keep fighting. Kubo the ogre suddenly calls to Norio asks the district to gather more fighters. Many beast people take turns fighting in the ring. They all stay in the ring and cannot push one another out of bounds. Everyone at the company enjoyed the fight and felt their needs were met. After a while, sumo became popular with them. After long battles, Prince Arwana emerged as the champion, and Norio had never imagined mermaids could stand on their feet so well. After a while, a voice in Norio's house announced the bread was ready. A girl bit into it with a crunch. The girl in the dress was the princess, and she was delighted by how soft the bread was. Vale loved the bread too. The girls admire the bread's flavor, saying food is the same across worlds, but the taste and texture differ. The princess asks her husband what this food he calls bread actually is, and Norio confirms it, explaining that it is a staple in his world and that wheat flour can be used to make other foods. Norio says this is another addition to his repertoire. Vale appears and asks him to hurry and make more of them for her. Before all this, the Lord Saint says he wants to prepare one more thing, a real food crop from his world that he plans to grow next. The product is rice. The girls stand stunned, not knowing which rice is being referred to. Vale begins to wonder what it tastes like. The Lord Saint explains that these slightly sweet white grains look like wheat, but are completely different. The princess is a little shocked by her husband's words. Norio says rice is grown the same way as wheat. The flesh princess is stunned by her husband's words and tells him they need to make some adjustments. The princess explains that right now the organ team manages construction projects, and all these orcs are working in the field. The member who joined after the demon race escaped is in charge of sewing. Belna controls the roots and helps others when they're short-handed. Their team also includes a foolish dragon. Vale says she protects this place from invasions, creates channels in the fields, and can move buildings. The princess agrees and says everyone is busy with their duties. The princess arrives, furious that they put so much effort into preparing the wheat, harvesting, thrashing, and grinding, because it is such a labor-intensive process. The girls agree with her. The princess screams that she's the only one in charge of medicine and food fermentation, and everyone else is shocked and realizes they made a mistake. The princess starts listing her tasks, preparing fertilizer for the fields, making meat and soy sauce in the brewery, and producing yeast while running the cold storage room. The princess rises and says she cannot handle all these duties on her own. Her husband drops to his knees, bows his head, and asks for forgiveness. Tears fill his eyes because he tried to do too much and underestimated how much work they had to do. He calls himself a terrible husband. The princess calms him and says it's okay because he understood everything. The wolf says it's all for good food and asks the princess to be patient for a little while, and the princess asks Vale to shut up. Suddenly a voice interrupts the princess and Vale's conversation. It is the mermaid prince called brother-in-law. Noria asks him to forgive her and calls him a terrible husband. Brother-in-law looks confused and asks the princess to explain. After negotiating with the saint, he says they agreed to sell pickled radishes, so he came to buy them. The princess immediately becomes furious when she discovers her brother-in-law ordered so many radishes, and he tries to calm her down. The princess says their neighbor, the immortal king, loves this radish, then asks you and the team why you like fermented food so much, and the brother-in-law says it is tasty and healthy. She says the bread is very tasty, and the girls confirm her words. They say there are so many types of fermented food. The girls say that although they come from the demon tribe, they are not skilled in pharmaceutical magic. Angered, the princess says her work harms people. Her husband breaks down in tears and asks for her forgiveness. Suddenly, the princess had an idea. She says her brother-in-law arrived just in time. I came up with a great idea that people could share her workload and others could specialize in making medicines. The princess asks her brother to bring some people from the mermaid kingdom here. Her brother-in-law does not understand what she means, so she says she will raise the price of pickled radishes. Then the processum turns to her dear husband, who says that if such a thing is possible, he fully supports it, and then the Holy Lord turns to his brother-in-law, who considers it. The princess pleads with her brother, saying she wants to taste the rice made by her beloved husband. Norio feels slightly embarrassed by his wife's words. After a moment of thought, his brother-in-law says sending the sea inhabitants will be difficult, and Norio asks him again. Sharina asks the Holy Lord if mermaids fear the shore, and Norio at first thought they hated him, but the dress suddenly began to appreciate the shore, and Sharina finds it hard to say anything but still decides. He calls the princess of the Pei a real weirdo, and at that moment, the brother-in-law's sister began to get angry and stand up. She can't understand his sudden remark, and he replies that any normal mermaid sees land as a hellish place. The girls understood it too because mermaids are fish. Their brother-in-law says sea creatures can usually live on land, so Platyfish, who chose to live on land, is a rare specimen. Her brother-in-law says the flesh medicine lets him move freely between land and water. Princess Platy feels great hearing him say it. Before that, everything was fiction. Rules limited which side effects could affect land dwellers, such as losing their voice, turning into bubbles, or dissolving. Velu appears and says all the mermaids should stay in the water, but the brother-in-law says that is impossible and that the goods are needed for the same diplomatic effort. My brother-in-law says that until a strong medicine appears, most sea creatures will not come onto land by themselves. Shurange insists that with better medicine, a new system must be set up to expel criminals, but the sea, along with the others, is surprised by the brother-in-law's words. Shorn says that besides the harshest punishment, they also use exile, and without an antidote, the exiled must spend the rest of their lives living on land in the wild. The Lord, the Saint, and everyone else are stunned by the brother-in-law's words. He says that for the sea dwellers, the shore will always be hell. It will be easier for the princess than for her brother to do anything about it because he is the prince of the mermaids. The law requires flesh assistants to reach a high level in potion brewing, but even with a royal command to work among people, they still spend a long time in the field. The princess fully agrees with her brother-in-law and suggests sending the exiled criminals here. Shorin and the rest of the company are stunned by her words. Shirk starts yelling and gets upset because he can't do it since the Kingdom of Mermaids owes a debt to the Holy Lord, so they cannot use his lands as a prison, and the Lore Flower says there is nothing wrong with that. Norio won't risk the board. Shorn says the Holy Lord is fearless as always. Most likely the criminals will be in danger. Suddenly Vale transforms into a dragon and declares she is irritated by everything and that we burn anyone who comes here. And Platy turns to her brother and says if he still wants to eat pickled radishes, he will have to bring 3 assistants. The Princess of Flesh doesn't care if these assistants are criminals, and she always welcomes those who are talented. The Princess of Flesh says her actions will bring them to heaven. Her husband starts apologizing for pushing her into a corner. After a while, Sharon arrived with help, and 3 half-naked girls stood before Norio. Vale is unsure whether having criminals under his command is normal, and Norio says it is not normal at all. He clears his throat slightly, apologizes for disturbing the Lord's Saint, then reintroduces all the girls and asks that no one call the one on the right a pufferfish, the one in the center an anglerfish, or the one on the right garufa. Norio doesn't understand why our brother-in-law brought the girls, since he calls them criminals and wants Norio to watch them closely. Lord St. Norio thanks these girls for coming, introduces himself as Kedon, and says he is glad to meet them. Pufferfish remembers to print what he said about the man. The angler doubts the landowner's abilities and is surprised she must work for him. Gara Rufa doesn't want to do anything. A voice suddenly interrupts them. It is Princess Platy, who tells the girls to get ready, and they are stunned by her arrival. The icy witch Rafa, the hellfire witch Runpai, and the epidemic witch Gara Rufa looked at the company in surprise. The brother-in-law says these girls are criminals as of today, and they will work in a penal colony overseen by his sister, Princess Platy. Ronpis stammers, trying to speak, then attempts to jump into Princess Lady's arms with a pleased expression while her brother-in-law Norio watches in bewilderment. Rumpai drops to one knee immediately. She hasn't seen Princess Platyfish in a long time. Brother-in-law and Norio watch in surprise. Rampai can't believe she will be serving the princess again and being paid. Tears well up as she tries to hold them back. For Rampai, this is the height of bliss, but she can't hold back and breaks down crying in front of the princess. The girl tells the company that Ron Pai is the criminal. Her brother-in-law confirms her statement. The 3 are known for their bad reputation in their country. Rafa smirks and says Ron Pai is only known for clinging to the royal family, and Rufa interrupts to say Rafa is in love with Prince Erwana, which is why she came without fail. Rafa grows indignant, shouting that she just wants to show life outside the sea instead of sitting in a cage forever. Rafa thinks it over and replies sarcastically to Rafa's words. Noriel realizes these girls do not get along well with each other. Rufa does not understand what they should do. Ronpai vows to serve the princess. Pei keeps paying until her body turns to dust. She will gladly destroy humanity using all her power. Pei does not understand who or when and asked her about it. Rafa asks them again. She's already willing to help destroy humanity. Plotty says their idea is cancelled so they can tone down their art. Norio asks Sharon which crimes the three of them committed, and though confused, Sharon still tells the story. He says that in the land of the mermaids, there were 6 magicians who used beastly potions and were called the crazy 6 witches. Sharon brought only 3 of them here. Norio and the girl beside him asked Sharon to repeat what he said. He says he will first tell Rafa's story. She can sense the mana flowing along the ocean floors and tried to develop a way to control it artificially, and she believes there is nothing wrong with that. Sharon says that if Rafa could control mana, she would seize every water source and destroy every person and demon, and Norio is frightened by the words. The brother-in-law says Rafa is not only an extreme radical, but also a master of her craft, so she had to be sent to prison. Norio understands everything that's happening. He asks about the girl with glasses, and the brother-in-law says she is Gara Rufa, a dangerous criminal, leaving Norio slightly shocked. Rufa once held significant authority as a specialist in the mermaid medical community, and Norio admires her a little, saying it's great to be doing that kind of work. Brother-in-law says Rufa once proposed a strange theory and then suddenly cut him off. Feeling a little disappointed, she says no one understands the appeal of her experiments. Rufa eagerly explains his theory that some diseases are caused by tiny invisible creatures. The brother-in-law did not and never would understand Rufa's enthusiasm, and Norio guessed that the invisible creatures Rufu mentioned were microbes. Norio paused and remembered the princess. Platti was also very surprised when he told her about yeast and fermentation. Rufa shouts for everyone to listen carefully, saying that once the body remembers these tiny creatures it can resist them, and Norio points out that Rufa means an immune reaction. Rufa continues to talk about his wild idea that if you take blood from someone who survived the disease and inject it into someone who had it before, their body will be able to resist. Noria realized Rufa was talking about a blood transfusion. Sharon exaggerates a little, claiming that injecting someone's blood into another could end that person's life. Rufa shows up and does not understand Sharon's contradiction. Norio finds Rufa's explanations understandable because he came from another world. Norio asks about the girl kneeling before the princess. Pay up, Brotherla says she is also a problem. Sharon says this girl originally served in the king's personal guard. Norio appears and asks Sharon why someone like her was imprisoned. My brother-in-law says it's all about his sister, or more precisely her unmarried status, and when marriage proposals for political alliances poured in from demons and humans, the mermaids were divided. Sharon says that at one point, an aristocrat among the mermaids of the neutral opposition opposed the marriage itself and took the matter directly to Sharon's father, the king of their country. My brother-in-law said there was no risk if the engagement suddenly fell through, that they would back off with time, and he sounded unperturbed. According to the record, the aristocrat said something he should not have, and went on to say the princess knows only her medicine, so whoever she marries she will not be able to manage being a wife. When Ronpai heard that, he became furious and, scowling, beat the aristocrat right there on the spot until there was no sign of life. Ronpai suddenly appears and interrupts Shiring's story, startling her. She says the incident was not her fault. She says the aristocrat who insulted Platia is entirely to blame, and the brother-in-law tells Norio that Ronpai refuses to admit guilt, so she was thrown in jail to cool her down. The brother-in-law apologizes for bringing these abnormal girls, and Platti says there is nothing that can be done about it now. Norio turns to Platti and asks if she will be okay. Embarrassed and pleased that he is worried, Platti is delighted. Her brother-in-law, with a calm face, says she will be okay. Platyfish angrily confronts Sharon and says he should not have been responsible for her. Sharon then wants to tell Mr. Norio one thing, that she is the princess. Platyfish is one of the crazy 6 witches. Norio grows worried about her, but she cannot remember her crimes. Her brother-in-law says Platti is the worst of the witches, that she caused the emergency using forbidden medicines, and that no one can oppose her because of her attitude toward the royal family. Platyfish earned the nickname Crown Witch. Norio realized his wife was a witch, and the thought haunted him, giving him no peace. The brother-in-law entrusts all matters to Platti, saying only she can pacify one of the 6, and Platti asks them to trust her. Platti was delighted by the event because now she will have much less work. Her brother-in-law, Norio, and the girl look at her with bewilderment and surprise. Ronpai says admiringly that she'll serve the princess again. She calls this place literally heaven on earth. Rafa thinks about Ronpai's words and asks what kind of place it is. Nario says the owner is a man named Kitten, and Rafa and Rufa think the place belongs to humans, though they saw a girl holding a piece of fabric that looked like a demon. Then a goblin and an ogre come to Norio to say the pizza oven is finished, and Norio thanks Okubo and Gabunchin for their work. The witch girls arrived, stunned by the scene. They couldn't believe an ogre and a goblin were talking with Mr. Norio. They wrongly assumed they were in the land of demons. Vale interrupts and tells them that for girls like them, their thoughts mean nothing, and their role is to quietly help the mermaid make the food even more delicious. The girls stare at Vale, puzzled that such a small child is so protective of them. Vale resents what they said and begins to glow, filling the entire space. They do not understand what is happening. Vale transforms into a dragon, says she stands a head taller than the other girls, and the witch team is shaken by her massive transformation. No one knows why the dragon from the two world disasters ended up here. Garufa suddenly collapses from shock. Norio tells Vale she will get no food if she does not keep quiet, and Vale calms immediately. He then announces they will have a pizza party today to celebrate the arrival of the three witches. Vale has never heard of pizza, so Norio tells her she'll know what it is when she tries it. Rafa does not know who this guy is. Plotty says the man is her husband, leaving Rampai and Rafa stunned and shocked, and Rampai then faints and falls to the ground. Suddenly Rafa heard a voice. She turned and saw a living skeleton in a robe and hat who thanked everyone for inviting it to the newcomers' party. Rafa says in a trembling voice that this is the immortal king, and is shocked that two world disasters have come together in one place. After that, Rafa also passes out and falls to the ground. Platty says they will not start the party until these girls wake up. After a while, the ramp opens her eyes and finds herself lying on a cozy bed, then suddenly jumps up as her friends are already waiting in the quiet room of a building decorated in warm wood. Ronpai is confused about where she is, and Rafa says they are in an oddly built house that smells pleasant and has a very soft bed. Rampai begins to remember that Prince Sarawana had brought them to the surface to do penal labor, and at that moment, a maid named Belina enters their room. They stare at her in shock, realizing she is from the demon race. Belina says St. Coden has given them a covenant and asks them to go to one place. They do not understand what holy throwing means. Rampai suddenly remembered who they had been talking about. A moment later, Rampai called Princess Platty. Princess Platty saw the call and Rampai ran frantically toward her. Dropping to her knees before the princess, she calls her poor and unhappy, saying the princess was forced to become the wife of a demon in this hellish land. Confused, the princess does not understand which hellish land is being talked about, declares that the man is her husband. The mermaid girl asks the princess again, and Rampai vows he will never forgive Kadhin and will send him to the next world. The other mermaids followed Rampai and questioned the princess about a man controlling land claimed by demons, and Belena said it was not demons' land. Explaining what this place is will be hard for all of them, and the princess confirms this. When Rufa asks, she says it is a completely independent territory. That place is the village of St. Codon, she says, but the girls do not understand and insist it cannot be true because the word village sounds rude, and they fear people and demons could start a war here. Anyone who says this war can be calmed quickly finds the ramp frightened by the unexpected presence. Ron Pai remembers this girl. The girl introduces herself as the dragon Grinzel Vale. Then the ramp remembers that she seemed to have seen the immortal king, and the immortal king suddenly appears near the girl. The immortal king's sudden appearance terrifies the mermaid girls. They cannot believe it and fear he may send them to the next world. Belina says she was surprised at first as well. She confirms that the immortal king and the dragon veils are protecting this place. Ron Pai is amazed, but also knows this land is as good as any country in the world. The princess tells the mermaid girls to live here without fear, and Vale says they should not only live here, but also work. Vale says the mermaid will eat these pathetic fishtails today, and the princess says it is not done only for the mermaid's sake. Rafa thinks they were brought here as cooks. Ron Pai rolls away in tears, turns to the princess, and says she has been brought very low. The princess asks her to repeat her words. Before dinner, the princess says she will take them to the place where they will work and asks Henbane to tell her husband, and Henbane agrees, promising to pass the message. Rafa can't believe they'll have to do the cooking. Rufo wanted to do some research, and Ron Pai wants to plan an escape from here with the princess. Soon they reach the place. The princess opens the doors and tells the girls this will be their workplace. The mermaid girls are stunned by what they see. They noticed an odd smell, but it did not seem unpleasant. The princess says this is where she prepares spices and food ingredients. The mermaid girl saw a dark liquid, and the princess said it was soy sauce. Scooping some into a cup, she asked the mermaid girls to try it. The girls are surprised to learn the soy sauce's origin, and the princess says it is similar to the medicinal additive used to flavor food. The girls take turns slowly dipping their fingers into the soy sauce, bringing those fingers to their lips to taste it, then immediately offering it to Shock. The girls are very pleased with the soy sauce's flavor, because it has a carefully chosen blend and several distinct flavors, and the princess agrees. Rampai says the princess created an amazing medicine, but the princess, puzzled, says she did not invent it. The princess says her husband told her that some of the ingredients contain tiny organisms and microbes that make this product. Rufa immediately showed interest in the princess's words. The princess says she does not understand what I mean, but you already feel this is something incredible. The princess says they were simply doing similar research, and Rufa confirms it. Rufa holds a bowl of soy sauce and realizes the tiny creatures she imagined live in it. The princess fully confirms this. Rufa cried with relief and joy. Her research assumptions were all correct, confirming the sauce resulted from fermentation by microorganisms. Overcome with joy, Rufa tries to drink all the soy sauce at once, and the princess tries to stop her, warning she will go to the next world if she does. She tells the story of the first time she tried soy sauce, but her husband stopped her. Rafa is a bit offended that someone else will already use her research, but she is also happy and wants to learn more about these microorganisms, and the princess is counting on Rufa. The other girls worry about the holy man. They suspect he is not as simple as he seems. When the princess calls her husband a hero, the mermaid girls are surprised. Rampai says Rafa pays attention to nothing but his research. She explains that summoned heroes are people brought from another world to fight demons and save people. Taken aback, Rafa hears Rampai say others in their world can have their own affairs, adding that the baseness of humanity is no longer news. The princess says she heard the king of humans forcibly summoned her husband to their world and expelled him for being unfit for battle, so he began to live by using the knowledge and skills from his old world. Suddenly a voice cut their conversation. It was the dragon Veil, brutally hungry, so she decided you and Mr. were all angry at these girls. After a while the pizzas were ready. 4 different pizzas sat on 4 trays. The mermaid girls look surprised at these dishes from another world. The Holy Lord says he will now cut the pizzas into pieces. After cutting the pizza into pieces, he hands plates of slices to everyone, giving the first to the dragon Veil, who is incredibly happy. Rampai says Lord Sankadin, the princess's husband, is very resourceful. Lord Sankadin and the princess's close friends sit together at a dining table piled with food. They all wish one another a good meal. The mermaid girls took the pizza pieces and tasted them one by one. The taste shocked them because they had never tried that kind of food before. Rampai says the food is incredibly delicious. They can hardly believe it really comes from another world and tastes so good. Rufa says the rich flavors lifted her soul to heaven. The Lord Saint is very pleased the girls like the food. Rampai watches silently, and the saint gives the teacher and the brother-in-law their favorite dishes, both admiring the large amount of food. Suddenly the princess remembers her older brother and tells him she will make lots of pickled radishes soon, asking him not to be shy about buying some, and the brother-in-law says this is good news and he will drop by again next week. Rafa is shocked that Prince Iruwana will arrive next week and cannot believe that a man so rarely seen, even by merfolk, would come in just a week. Rufa is very pleased with what is happening. Turning to Rafa, Rufa says she did not say anything. Norio asks his wife if they have more, and the girl replies they do. Delighted, the princess finds her husband's dish once again beyond praise. The saint asks his beloved about the tomatoes because she loves them. They laugh together, enjoying each other's company. Rampai thinks to himself about the princess and does not understand why she admires this man so much, but she looks very happy. Later that night, the mermaid girls go to their room and settle into a warm, cozy bed, and Rafa says the food was really tasty. Rufus credits the tiny creatures for everything. Rampai says a man named Kidden turned out to be a hard worker. The girls start talking about the day because Batumi made them a bed. The bed felt smooth and pleasant to the touch. The fabric was silk, an expensive material made from rare threads. The house and the futon are very cozy. The girls continue to imagine what could be, and most likely this is not a hellish place but a paradise on earth. Outside the building's walls, there was a deep, moonless night. After a while, Rafa finishes her work. Rufus suddenly comes in and interrupts, holding out an arched object and asking Rafa to help with Rufa's work once Rafa is done. She asks to soak the dried radish in wheat miso. Rafa asks again. He laughs softly and says the wheat miso contains mold. He finds that disgusting. This is how pickled radishes are made. Rafa thinks the prince will taste food she made. Rufa likes Rafa's idea, but Rafa says she never said anything like that. Rafa asks about Ranpai's disappearance, and Rufa says she went hunting with the orcs because she likes physical exercise, and later Ranpai walks along a path with 2 orcs. Ranpai spotted something at the corner of her eye. A wild boar suddenly leaped out on command. She braced and prepared to strike. As the boar closed in, she cut it in two with a quick, sharp blow. The orcs celebrate. Rampai, the royal knight, calls it a mere trifle, but soon the night falls. In his room, the Lord Saint discusses the three mermaids. The princess says they really help her. She says they not only helped her husband, but also teamed up with the juices and goblins, so they finished the radish field faster. He says they now have seedlings that just need planting, and once they sprout, they can grow rice from his world. The Holy Lord says cooking rice has special meaning for him. The princess turns to her husband, but does not get a clear answer. Lost in thought, she begins to rejoice. She insists they must cook the rice as quickly as possible, and her husband agrees. The field was ready for planting, with rice sprouts in special boxes laid out, and the mermaid girls did not know what to do with them. They learned they would plant seedlings today. Rafa asks if rice must be planted directly in water. The princess fully confirms it. Rafa asks for mercy because she'll stain the clothes Baitme made for her. Baitme thanks her and says the clothes are meant for field work. Rufa says that after exiling the saint, this rice is one of the fermentation components needed to make sake, and she is sure the drink will be very tasty and that Prince Irohana will also be very pleased. Rafa says this is what they're here for, and she's looking forward to the rice. Rufa is very happy because she will be able to work with the product of defeat. Ronpai tells the princess he won't let her get dirty and asks to take all the work himself, because for her sake he will go through water and fire. Vale will have to work too, even though she doesn't want to. The princess asks her husband to show them the proper way to plant rice. He instructs them to take 3 or 4 seedlings and hold them between their thumb and forefinger. Next, he shows them how to plant the seedlings in water. The others agree, and the princess announces a rice planting tournament for all the villagers. They step into the water one by one. Rufa feels a little worried because the cold water gives her goosebumps. Ron Pai is surprised to find Rafa doing her job so carefully. The maid girls help the team by bringing new seedlings. All the villagers slowly plant the seedlings in the water. The mermaid girls in the dragon veil also help plant the rice. Ran Pai is excited about something. The mermaid girls are frustrated because the work is harder than they imagined. Rufus's legs can't handle it, and Rampai's lower back hurts. The servant girls are also upset that this work is harder than working in the fields. One of them can no longer stand it and falls face down into the water. In the end, she wants to make a couple more dresses. A saint rushes to Baitme to help and asks about her health. Vale watches and says they are weaklings after all. The princess asks her if she is tired. Vale says she's a dragon and keeps her strength in human form, noting the princess isn't tired, and adding that unlike others, the princess has strong legs and is already used to this work. They all suggest to the princess that they hold a contest to see who can do it faster, and the princess smiles and says she won't lose to a girl who only sleeps and eats. Both girls are determined and ready to win. When the rice planting competition begins, one girl immediately rushes forward and starts planting quickly. Lord St. Kidden does not understand what is happening. The mermaid girls are clearly surprised by what they see. The two of them handled one strip quickly. Their rice placement is perfect. They are impressed by the display and call it the greatest skill. Right now the princess stands first on the landing, and the dragon is not far from her. When the princess suddenly ran out of seedlings, she asked someone to bring more, and Runpai immediately took them and hurried to deliver them to her in time. Suddenly Vila pushes Ronpai, making her lose her balance. The other mermaid girls are surprised. Ronpai is far from the princess. The princess is shocked to see their field is slightly battered. Rampai says she is fine. However, she is surprised that even in human form Vale has dragon strength. Rampai admits she underestimated the field work and tells Princess Platy that the strength of her human legs is simply incredible. Rampai says hard work is the foundation of training. The princess admits that may be true, but she is not doing all this just for training. Vale appears and says it is all about eating delicious food. Vale and the princess dream of the taste of rice. Rampai understands this is all about food. The princess motivates everyone by not telling them they must finish cultivating the whole field today. With everyone's help, they finished everything in one day, and the princess's magical products made the seedlings grow in 1 month. Finally, after a while, the rice was ready. The saint's close, dear friends looked in surprise at the steaming rice. The saint says rice can be eaten anytime, day or night. Vale is eager to taste the rice and pleads with her master to let her try it right away. The princess appears and says that the arrest should be tasted by the husband first. The maids say the princess did everything she could to make the rice grow faster, and when the saint asks the girls again, they confirm his words. People say the princess fertilized the rice so it would grow quickly and sat behind the field asking them to help with the preparations needed for a good harvest. Lena chuckles softly. The princess asks Lena to stop telling the story. Kitten feels slightly embarrassed and surprised by his wife's actions. The princess then asks her husband to finally taste the rice. Kitten agrees with his wife, then fills a cup with rice, holds it in his hands, and slowly samples a small amount while the girls behind him watch with anticipation. Taking a small grain of rice, the Lord Saint slowly brings it to his mouth as the princess waits for her husband's opinion, and he calls it incredibly delicious, even shedding a small tear of pleasure. The princess looks at her husband, a little shocked. Vale appears, asks the saint what it is, says it is so delicious it brings tears, and asks him to let her try it right away. Saint asks Vale to wait while he prepares the side dish so she can enjoy the full range of flavors. Rampy says the princess did everything she could to make this man smile and is glad she did her best, and Rafa understands her friend perfectly. Rafa replies that she didn't say anything like that. When the princess asks her husband why the rice is special to him, he says it may be the national food of his world. The husband agrees with her, but there is one exception. He also wanted to thank everyone who helped him. Turning to his wife, he thanks her for helping him. Norio turns to Hephaestus and asks about her health because he lives here and enjoys life thanks to her. Apologizing for being late, he hands her the onigiri with gratitude and asks her not to be shy and to taste the fruits of their shared effort. The princess tells her husband the food can be dangerous, and at first, because it lacked flavor, she did not see the appeal, but the rice becomes very tasty when served with other dishes. The girls agree with the princess and say they too no longer want to return to a place without that food. Fail asks her master for more food. The saint believes the girls really enjoyed the rice. Rafa says rice is a frightening thing. Vanity says that now they have rice, he wants to cook other dishes. Stunned by the news, Plotty and Val do not understand that they will have more dishes and did not know rice can be improved with other dishes. Vale suddenly stands and announces she will return to her dungeon and raise the difficulty. Saint looks a little shocked by the announcement. Princess says it is a good idea. Keaton is unsure how this relates to rice. The princess explains that raising the dungeon passage level can cause new monsters to appear that were not there before. Vale fully agrees with the princess and says this can improve the taste of not only rice but other dishes as well, and Kitten did not know such a thing could be done in the dungeon. Rafa says only top-ranked beings like dragons can alter the dungeon in this world. The dungeon follows its own rules. Because it overflows with mana, its space becomes warped. The princess says only one of the two world disasters can change the dungeon. Vale confirms this. Kitten remains wary of her words. Rafa never expected such miracles to come together. This place seems incredible to her. Rufa remembers that Rafa was studying how mana flows and how it affects others. Rampai encourages Rafa not to give up. The princess suggests focusing on preparing the meal ingredients. Ron Pai wants to test her strength in Lady Vale's updated dungeon, and the dragon says a weakling like her cannot challenge the dungeon. They all grew curious, and she will set up several levels to see how Ron copes, which will likely cause trouble for the princess. A few days later, Dragon Vale is ready to reveal her updated dungeon and asks the team to attack together, while Sint is annoyed by Vale's voice from the mountaintop. The princess says they're just going to study new creatures, but she feels the final bosses are waiting for them. The team gathered to explore the Vale dungeon. Ron Pai believes the saint went with them, summoned from another world by the people's king and cast out for being powerless. She doubts the saint can handle this multi-level dungeon, but she will protect the princess with all her strength. The team spots movement ahead. A herd of wild boars attacks them. Ron Pai asks that they be given to her. The girl freezes as the immortal king steps forward, and with a single wave of his hand, destroys the entire herd in a second. The immortal king says he found the adventure interesting and decided to join them. At that moment, Vale speaks to him. She forbids him from changing her dungeon on his own. Then the dragon's claws seize the immortal king by the collar. Vale says the immortal king is disqualified for cheating. The team thanks him because he saved them. They would have struggled against so many monsters. Ron Pai says being friends with two world disasters deeply undermines her pride as a royal knight, and the team breathes a sigh of relief. Then she takes back her words and says she exists to protect the princess. The husband and wife consider changing the dungeon, but so far they've only encountered familiar monsters. Vale reassures them they are now in the old zone, warns it would cause trouble if the old monsters disappeared, and adds that the new zone waits ahead. After a while they reached a clearing. The princess asks her husband to be careful. They realize someone is nearby. Rampai says he senses powerful monsters close by. Suddenly something appears behind Rampy, and they do not understand what is happening as spinning pucks jump out of the tall grass and attack them. Ketten says the pucks look like UFOs, and those flying discs are heading toward them. their fast spin making them blade-sharp and slicing off the tops of trees, but the team managed to dodge. Keaton says it's a UFO, then repeats that it's an unidentified flying object. Rampai says she can handle it herself. The princess insists she should not be underestimated because she has the power of a crowned witch, and Rampai promises to do everything he can to help her. Keaton felt nervous but still wanted to help. He gripped the sword and took a fighting stance. Rampai saw him and said the sword should be held on the other side. Rampai takes the bag, says they must stop their breakthrough first, pulls the clasp with her teeth and tosses the bag into the air. The bag starts to glow as flying objects approach, then it triggers a massive explosion. The princess remembers that the Rampai use explosive potions. The saint understood why people call her the Witch of Hellfire. Proud that she was able to defeat them, the girl suddenly falls silent when she realizes the flying objects were unharmed, and Vale begins boasting about their strength. Vale says these monsters are turtle-shaped and have the hardest shells of all. Rampai steps closer and says they can be flipped over to disable them. Without warning, something shot out of the turtle's head and wrapped around the girl's hand. They were ropes of some kind that slowly began to wrap around the whole girl. The princess can't tell what these tentacled turtles are. Gabukichai tries to free the girl but fails. The orc swings, aiming to strike the turtle's body. He strikes the turtle's shell, but it is so hard his axe breaks, and Rampai is surprised too. The turtles, one by one, send out many tentacles from their heads that slowly reach toward the team, so the princess asks her husband to deal with it, and he agrees at once. The turtle's tentacles slowly wrapped around the girl's neck. The saint swung and struck them with a crushing blow. The tentacles flew apart in all directions. The saint stood stunned by what he had done. Then the Holy Lord asks about Ranpai's health. Ranpai says she is fine as smoke rises from the turtle's head, and the princess picks up one turtle and notices that the sharp tentacles were their weak point. People are surprised the team beat those turtle monsters. Those Anna created are among the weakest. The team will face even stronger opponents, and Anna asks them to move on to the next level. The orc says the skulls can be used as armor and shields for other goblins and orcs, and Sint confirms this, while Vale tells the team not to keep her waiting. The princess appears and says they only came to study new monsters. Ranpai warns that even stronger monsters await them ahead. She says everything is fine. She says her husband is stronger than the world's disasters. He is the strongest person in the world, she says. Ranpai is bewildered. She doubts the princess's words and can't believe the princess's husband is the strongest husband in the world, so she refuses to lose heart and will find a new goal that suits her, while the team decides to take a short break. The team took a break at a spot in the forest. Ranpai, surprised, says she never expected the Holy Lord to be stronger than the immortal king and the dragon. She still cannot understand why the human kingdom banished the Holy Lord despite his incredible power. The Holy Lord says he really has no fighting skills. At one point, a god gave him a gift that lets him fully unleash the power of anything he touches. Also, this lord holds a sacred ball. Ranpai is very surprised by the saint's words. Kitten says that means he is not so special. Ranpai says the saint's power is very useful. Princess Platy married a very handsome man, so if demons or humans attack her, the whole mermaid kingdom will be safe. The sun was shining brightly in the sky, causing glare in the eyes, and the princess says the surrounding landscape has not changed much, but instead has become even hotter. The dragon's voice cuts through the princess's thoughts. Vale announces the next scene is called Scorching Hell, and that monsters suited to that environment will attack them. A pack of wolves with manes like fire appeared before the team, and everyone grew wary and assumed fighting stances. Vale says this is the most dangerous of the four-legged monsters here, the hyena lichens. They are strong, agile, and ferocious, and they only get stronger when they are hot. Vale says their victory is sure and their endurance makes escape impossible, then turns to Lord Saint and asks what he can do against the wolves, and at that moment, the wolves attack him. Both the princess and Ranpai were interested in the question. Suddenly their expressions changed, and they looked deeply bewildered. The wolves all rolled on the ground like obedient dogs. The creatures didn't understand at first, but the immortal king said the hyena lichens had sensed the Holy Lord's power, and the wolves looked at the Holy Lord gently and did not try to attack him. Lord Saint starts treating the regiments like pets, a bit annoyed but also pleased. After a while, the team keeps moving through the scorching hell, and the wolves calmly follow without trying to stop them. The immortal king's voice says wolf-like monsters set up strict hierarchies to form packs, so the wolves recognize the Lord Saint as their leader. The wolves simply stare at Lord Saint Suitly, who looks at them confused but pleased, and he admits he never thought they'd like him so much without his gift. Ron Pite realizes they are in a high-level dungeon. The princess says this could cause problems. Vale asks her to praise him and warns that even worse monsters lie ahead. The team takes the wolves with them and continues exploring the Vale dungeon. They reach a place completely covered in snow. The princess does not understand why it is so cold here. Vale announces this is the final point of her dungeon freezing hell. The princess wants to go home, and at that moment the Lord Saint turns around. The whole team turns and sees a monster standing behind them. A huge bear stood on all fours and stared at the team with ferocity. The bear's presence frightens the Holy Lord. The girls say it's the same enormous power they felt when they first came here, and this monster stands a head taller than those they met earlier. The princess urges her husband to leave this place, while the battered man says the monster is powerful and wants to avoid senseless destruction. The Lord realizes even he cannot escape him, so he turns to his teacher. The immortal king's voice says the bear also understands the Holy Lord's full power. The bear is a warrior who only knows how to fight. The immortal king's voice announces that the bear is destined to challenge the strong. Then the bear roars and begins its attack. The bear charges the Lord's saint, and wolves appear behind the Lord to attack the bear, surrounding it from different sides because they believe this shows their devotion to their master. Unable to help, the saint asks Rampai to handle it. She runs forward, drawing her rapier to stop the bear from attacking the team. She makes a swift, precise cut to the bear's legs. The bear growls in pain, cannot stand, and collapses to the ground. Rampai says the tendon in his paw is damaged and he won't be able to move. The saint thanks Mrs. Rampai, and the team wants to go home. Their friend is interrupted by Vale's voice. She tells them to stand still and says she will not let everything end like this, while the bear lies unconscious and Holy calls to the girls and the rest of the team to stop. Turning to his wife, he asks about the ointment he asked her to take. Platyfish and Rampai look slightly shocked. The saint will use the ointment on the bear. Rampai says if people leave the bear alone, he will simply disappear. If his enemies test his mercy, he will become very angry. The immortal king's voice wants to turn the bear into mana. The Vale urges the immortal king not to act on his own. The saint turns to the teacher. Doubting himself, Cadden wants to save the bear because he's sure it didn't come to attack them and probably had a purpose. Having no choice, the princess gives the ointment to the Holy Lord, and Kidden apologizes to Rampai for making her work so hard to protect them. Rampai says Lord Saint is too soft. She doubts he can protect the country and the princess. Lord Saint prepares for action. Keaton asks Mr. Bear to take better care of himself so he can live longer. Mr. Bear does not respond to the Holy Lord's words. The team's actions angered the Dragon Vale. She cannot understand why they broke her rules and says she has nothing left but to use the last resort. Velsamar appears on the battlefield and announces she will be their opponent. Rampai is stunned that the final boss is a dragon, and Vale is thrilled by the team's reaction. She reassured the team it was just a clown with 1/100th of her strength, but even that could destroy a couple of cities. She asks the team to attack, and Lord Saint suddenly sees out of the corner of his eye a bear strike the dragon on the head. The girls stand frozen. The dragon slowly fades from the blow and soon evaporates entirely. Canyon is shocked that the bear destroyed the Vale clone. Kidden and the bear exchanged looks. Viato cannot understand why the bear did that. After those words, the bear turns sharply and slowly fades over the horizon until it is out of sight. The Orking Doblins say I, as a monster, cannot understand this bear's feelings. They say the bear is proud. Now this fight is his way of repaying their master's kindness. Kubo says the bear left on his own to become a powerful monster their master will acknowledge, and the saint says that means the saint and the bear will meet again. So far, she has fought to protect whoever she wants. Her actions did not make the world a better place. That kindness, being willing to help friend or foe, was likely her real strength. Later in the village of the Holy Lord Kidden, the Dragon Vales wore satisfied frowns. Rufa says her new dungeon did not impress anyone. When the Holy Lord speaks to the dragon, he gives her a new dish and says it is from their new menu called Katsuden. The saint says that while descending the mountain, they finally found a bird monster that laid eggs, and after that the saint was finally able to cook the dish he had wanted for so long, all thanks to the reconstructed Dungeon of Vale. Saint says he can now improve his cooking skills. He thanks Vale. Vale melts with happiness and her face and eyes shine with joy. She feels a little embarrassed. Esvaitoa calls the whole company to the table because the food is already served. After a short while, a strange exclamation is heard. Everyone is surprised by the unfamiliar, distinctive flavor. During the dungeon search, the saint says the team finally found his long-awaited eggs, and outside he notes their settlements are becoming livelier. Saintly Lore is interested in the future. He does not know what will happen to their settlement. Then, elsewhere in the forest, events happen. Two hooded strangers are talking. clueless about what is happening and unable to believe a village exists here. The whole team sat on the branches of trees. Aileron, the head of this gang of thieves, says she must see everything with her own eyes. The first wolf was named Pachai, the second Pez, the third Khan, and the fourth Taro. A holy lord throws a bandage and tells his wolves to fetch it. The holy lord says these were the wolf monsters he met in the Vale dungeon who came to live with him, and he pets one, moved by its beauty. Lord Saint says Pokey and the others are clearing out pests and driving off stray monsters from the dungeon. There is one small problem. The wolves are fighting again over a mouse they caught. Esvaitoa worries there will not be enough food for the wolves. Then an idea comes to him. After a while he starts preparing meat. Vale approaches and asks what he is doing. The saint says he will cook dog food. The food is for his wolves. Vale is unhappy that the wolves eat their food too. Vale says it's not funny, breathes a stream of flame, and vows to deal with the wolves herself. Saint says that's unnecessary because the wolves already belong to their family. Still dissatisfied, Vale watches as Saint draws his sword, and it's time to grind the ingredients. The saint admires his remarkable orb because it can slice food down to microscopic particles. Vale is a bit upset that the saint is being mistreated with her unholy greatsword. She can't forgive Lord Saint. Out of anger, she's going to eat that dog thing. Dog food had been prepared in a small barrel. Lord Saint says he improved his dog's health, removed excess fat, and added vegetables to keep the diet balanced. Lord Saint wondered whether the dogs would like the food, but his fears were proven wrong as they loved it, and then a voice distracted him. Vale had turned into a dragon and asked for some of the food too. Svarti's Vadu could do nothing and told Vale to change back and hold out her hands. He pours some dog food for her. Vale looks at her palms full of dog food with bright eyes. She immediately pounces on the treat. As she chooses the dog food carefully, she says it might be nutritious but tastes more like animal food, and her expression suddenly changes. She gave a small smile and turned to one of the dogs, and even the dogs were frightened by her look. She said she would tell them to eat as much as they wanted. Since then, Vale has not eaten dog food because it tasted bland. Some voices are curious about the settlement and don't know what fruits, berries, or vegetables grow on those bushes. Some say this never happened even on rich estates or among demons. They see someone tending the fields. A gang member picks a fruit and tastes it, then asks his boss to try it, and the boss's cheeks go numb. These fruits taste amazing. The boss will try them too. Suddenly she realizes something. The aroma behind this lovely fruit is unfamiliar. It's almost too tasty for her. A servant of one of the bosses reports the area is being watched and has noticed several houses with strange architecture and gardens, so the village looks more like a farm, confirmed by the mysterious harvest. The group assumes aristocrats live here, and if that's true, they're not surprised that these fields are in the middle of nowhere. A man in the group doesn't know what to do with all this, and the boss says there's probably treasure hidden in this area. Missing this chance would ruin their reputation as skilled thieves. The boss calls himself Thunder Freezers, and they will clean out this mansion and take all the valuables. The boss suddenly notices one of the Lord Saint's dogs watching them from the bushes, while inside the building the servant girl is creating magic circles in the sky. While checking the waypoints, she found nothing normal. Belena says she maintains the waypoints for His Majesty the Demon King and for the Demon Queen Misastris. Calling the job worthless because she only got to sing one song, she helped everyone and everything and had worked under the Demon King before moving here. 3 mermaids now handle tasks in areas with labor shortages, so her workload has dropped significantly, and recently the servants have had too much free time. Clenching her fist, she says this is really bad, then goes quiet and warns that if it continues she will lose everything and be left without a job. Determined to do something, she asks Lord Saint for a job. After searching the mansion, she finally finds him making pottery. A servant interrupts because he does not understand what the Holy Lord is doing, and the Lord says he is making a pot, a clay bowl. Since their dishes are made of mana metal, he says it was time to get some real pottery. The servants finally realized they'd been dining on dishes made of precious metals. The saint says hand molding takes too long, so he decides the pot needs reshaping and turns it, and the servant suddenly realizes something. Balina is eager to help the Light Lord, and the servant appreciates her zeal, but says the work is very labor-intensive and that the Holy Lord can still use her. Belina says she actually has psychokinesis, and if she gives magic to a pebble afterward, it will start moving. That's the only magic she can do on a single pebble. She puts it on a spinning machine, secures it with clay, and says a prayer. With his arms outstretched, the forward-rotating machine begins to spin. The Holy Lord is pleased with the work of the henbane, and it spins faster and faster until the clay on it flies into the Holy Lord's face. Lord of the Color asks Henbane to slow down, and she apologizes, while Lord Saint remarks that she is working hard and Henbane denies it. She admits she works very hard but still isn't as good as his girlfriend or others. Because she doesn't want to lose her job, she constantly needs help. Lord Flower says there is nothing to worry about and thanks her for helping with the pot. Henbane says the pot has turned into a pancake and she couldn't do anything about it. Lord Saint asks Henbane to solve everything together. She smiles at his words. After a while, they end up with a dented cup. Bellina wants to break it, but Lord Saint stops her. Anna says the first pancake is always lumpy and tells her not to be upset. He insists something can still be done, and Henbane tells him not to back her so strongly. A friend distracts them by calling out. The wolves bark wildly, so they run toward the sound. A group of thieves had been caught and tied up. Lars asks Okubo to explain, and Okubo says they caught a group of elven bandits on their farm. Elves resembled demons, but evolved separately throughout history. Lord Saint believed they were allies of his servants, but she says elves do not interact with humans or demons. Servants learned that many Elysian bandit groups were stealing indiscriminately, earning a bad reputation among humans and demons. They probably have a shelter no one can get into, which is why they're so hard to catch. A saint appears and says they likely live in the mountains, places that are isolated from the world. Turning to a group of thieves, he says they must have been surprised to find their farm. The boss then asks the Lord Saint who they are, and the saint replies that his name is St. Kidden, and this is where St. Kidden settled. Some of you whisper that Kidden is human, but you do not understand why he is with a demon or that the rest of the village are monsters. Holy Lord, you understand these thieves are still confused. He turns to the orc and asks what they did. The orc says they stole tomatoes from their farm. Another girl interrupts the orc story. The princess and the dragon come to the noise. They are furious that they ate their tomatoes. Vale immediately turns into a dragon and says they deserve to be destroyed. Sveta understands that Vale can no longer be stopped. The princess says this is their problem and warns that if they refuse to let them go unpunished, there is no guarantee this will happen again. Vale tells the thieves they must be executed so everyone understands what will happen if they invade their property. The thieves are stunned and terrified. They start crying and ask for forgiveness, saying they will end their careers immediately. Belena's friend remembered something. She says she saw the group in the archives. This group is intended only for wealthy celebrities and traders. Most of the aristocrats they hunted were corrupt, padding their pockets with taxes and bribes. The nobles whose deeds were exposed had their actions disgraced by the demon King Zedin. Vale says those who invaded their lands should not be executed. She tells the thieves to get ready. After a pause, the Lord of Color agrees with the princess. Lord Saint is about to pass sentence in a theft case. He turns to the elven bandits who stole 8 tomatoes from the farm and says this is a serious crime. As a result, they will all work for them, and Bellina listened closely to Lord St. Kedden's story, but afterward her expression changed and she looked puzzled.